Chapter 2013. Lin Dai, did not know. This was Jiang Tian's past self. He was cruel and merciless, enjoying killing. He did not have as many scruples as Jiang Tian. Deep in the hall, Jiang Tian, who was using the art of deceiving heaven and earth to conceal himself, sighed and closed his eyes. Jiang Tian had wanted to kill Lin Dai, for a long time. As long as Jiang Tian released his past self, he would not be under Jiang Tian's control. It would be meaningless for him to stop him now. My past self would definitely find a suitable opportunity. Duke of Beijiang, it's your turn, Jiang Tian laughed. Imperial tutor, I'm innocent. The Duke of Beijiang was so frightened that he knelt on the ground and said pitifully, Imperial tutor, I was completely fooled by Brother Dehe. I didn't know that you wanted to abolish the feudal system. I thought you only wanted to reform the hidden dragon trials. So, I didn't plan to rebel at all. I was thinking of how to give a gift to let my successor have an advantage in the hidden dragon trials and keep my title and land. He wanted to cry but had no tears. Do you think I'm blind? When I was besieged by the sect leaders, you laughed and gloated. Passing me, Jiang Tian laughed out loud and tapped. The Duke of Beijiang did not even have time to scream before his body exploded. His divine treasures were shattered, and his deity body was crushed into powder. This time, all the feudal lords were terrified. After all, they all wanted to keep their fiefs and titles. When Jiang Tian was surrounded, they all rejoiced in his misfortune. According to this standard, except for Fang Jinlong and Lin Hanqing, everyone else would not be able to escape death. Saint, please don't be angry. Spare my life. I know my mistakes and will definitely repent. Imperial tutor, please have mercy on me and forgive my sins. The Duke of Black Fox and the rest were all scared out of their wits. They knelt on the ground and kowtowed. I'm Gu He from the ancient medicine hall. I'm Wang Qing, the Grand Elder of the Nine Mysteries sect. I'm Lian Huahan, Saint Chenma. I'm here to see Saint Siqing. At that instant, a voice could be heard as a few cultivators landed on the ground. I, along with the princes and dukes, greet the seniors. Seeing this, Eastern Lu's expression froze, and he hurriedly kowtowed. His attitude was very respectful, and even a little nervous. Even eldest Princess Mou, who was known as the Empire's goddess of war, bowed in admiration. After all of the mighty figures of this continent were returned to void stage saints. They were far too powerful. Your Majesty, you're too polite. I'm just a commoner. How could I deserve such great respect? Gu He looked like a middle-aged man with sword-like eyebrows. He hurriedly half-knelt on the ground to show his respect. Then he held Eastern Lu's arm with both hands and helped him up. This person had an elegant and gentle temperament, and his attitude was kind and humble. He didn't have the domineering aura and fierceness of one of the top experts on the continent, the ruler of a holy land. When people faced him, they felt as if they were bathed in a spring breeze, and they immediately felt a sense of familiarity. This had something to do with the ancient medicine hall's cultivation technique and mission. Although their cultivation was not bad, their mission was to help the world and the people. They did not like to kill and bully the weak. You deserve it, you deserve it. The ancient medicine hall is the pillar of the continent, the leader of the righteous sections. This junior has always been full of admiration. Eastern Lu greeted the mighty figures of the sects one by one. He talked and chatted happily, but his heart was beating like a drum. He was on tenterhooks, and the back of his clothes was drenched in cold sweat. At this moment, Jiang Tian seemed to have the intention of declaring war on the sections. After destroying several large sects in succession, these mighty figures of the sects were very likely here to cause trouble for Jiang Tian. After the greetings, Gu He cupped his fists and said, I have a matter to discuss with State Advisor Siqing. Could it be that we're really going to war? At this moment, not only Eastern Lu, but also Mou, Dongfang Ying, Fairy Qingjue, and the others' hearts were hanging in the air. The dukes were also trembling in fear, afraid that they would be implicated. Everyone, do you want to fight with this seat? Jiang Tian chuckled, but there was already a hint of fear in his voice. The reason why he started a massacre was because abolishing the dukedom system was secondary. More importantly, he wanted to blow this matter up and conceal the clues that led to Yang Dingtian's death. He didn't want the undying emperor above the 9 heavens to see through his identity with the clues of Huanglinger. Only then would he be able to jump out of the chessboard of fate and not be a chess piece, controlling his own fate. But in fact, the destruction of so many large sects was already sufficient, and his objective had been achieved. At this moment, if the undying emperor were to observe the changes in the lower realm from the 9 heavens, the state advisor's feast was like a bonfire that was blazing and eye-catching. Meanwhile, Yang Dingtian's death was like a spark that was dim and indistinct. It was impossible for the undying emperor to detect it. At this moment, there was no need to fight with Gu He. Furthermore, apart from this deity and Dao Wu making a move to defend against the enemy, he had no chance of winning. But this deity and Dao Wu had to ensure that the information was concealed, and it was impossible for us to openly help him. He said this because he was fulfilling his duty and was acting out his final act. He maintained his wild and tyrannical, and disregarding the heroes of the world, persona. That's not true. Gu He looked at Jiang Tian and revealed a shocked expression. He cupped his fist and spoke respectfully and warmly. This old man had always wanted to maintain the order of the Saint Origin world. He had worked hard for 1,000 years, but the Saint Origin world was still ruled by the strong and the weak were treated as ants. There were endless massacres. Lord State Advisor's reform was an internal affair of the empire. Su Zhe and the others shouldn't have interfered and shouldn't have used their martial strength to suppress others. Their skills were inferior, and in the end, they were killed by the State Advisor. They deserved it and couldn't blame others. You are quite sensible. Past self Jiang Tian smiled, feeling as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his heart. But, Daoist Siqing, you shouldn't have killed the innocent and implicated the sects behind them. Those disciples and clansmen might not know anything and had no enmity with you. Wouldn't it be unjust for them to die so miserably? Gu He's expression was filled with regret as he spoke earnestly. Daoist, you have to understand that there are different factions among the human race. On the continent, there are sects and countries. Within a country, there are royal families, feudal lords, and aristocratic families. Even the territories of the feudal lords are divided into 3, 6, and 9 classes. But no matter what, we belong to the human race. And once there is too much internal strife in the human race, then the demon race and even the devil race will take advantage of the situation and the master of this world will no longer be us. Who knows how many humans will fall into the abyss of suffering? Saint Qianma also smiled bitterly. Saint Siqing, these days, we have monitored many demonic chi cracks that have shown signs of unrest. Demons and monsters have already begun to invade and the situation is not good. It is very likely that there will be an unprecedented war. At this time, the human race, whether it is the empire or the sects, really shouldn't have any conflicts and should unite against the outside world. Jiang Tian knew that Gu He, Saint Qianma, and the others were not hypocritical. They were sincere. They were the top leaders of the human race on the continent, the pillars that supported the heavens. Naturally, they considered the safety and prosperity of the entire human race on the continent. But Jiang Tian knew that according to the historical process, the human race would still prosper, the demon race would be suppressed, and the devil world would not be able to infiltrate. Secondly, he was not a giant of the continent. He was not even a native. Of course, he did not consider so much. He only cared about the group of people he valued the most. I know that I have sinned deeply. Jiang Tian bowed slightly and said in a low voice, fortunately, the marquis system has been abolished. It can be considered a wish. From today onwards, I will seal my saber and not interfere with the affairs of the world. I will face the wall and reflect on my mistakes. I will chant scriptures and praise Buddha every day. I will expiate the vengeful spirits that died tragically in my hands. I hope that they will ascend to paradise as soon as possible. The moment Jiang Tian said that, everyone was in an uproar. Chapter 2014. He actually wants to resign from his position as the Grand Tutor. No one had expected this. Jiang Tian had always been strong and not weaker than others. He had the disposition to dominate the world. Yet, he suddenly announced that he would resign from his position as the Grand Tutor. This was too unbelievable. Could it be that he was pressured by the sages? But Gu He and the rest did not show any intention of threatening Jiang Tian. Fairy Qingjue panicked and hurriedly said, "Fellow Taoist Siqing, the seniors did not come with this intention." The Grand Elder of the Nine Mysteries sect smiled and said, "Indeed. Fellow Taoist Siqing, we came to find you mainly to discuss the establishment of the human race. We will suppress the demons together and resist the invasion of the demons." Saint Chinma said, "We plan to establish the human race alliance with the sect masters of the 5 sacred grounds and an empire representative. And fellow Taoist Siqing is the best candidate for the empire representative. The empire representative can mobilize the resources of the various countries. Even the monarch has to listen to his orders." Seeing that Jiang Tian was unmoved, Gu He said, "That's right. Fellow Taoist Siqing, you have to understand that the greater the responsibility, the greater the ability. Moreover, what you said about reciting scriptures and praising Buddha is just a lie. If you really want to atone for your sins, why don't you do your part to protect the human race?" Oh my God! This is really like a fish leaping over the dragon's gate. Becoming a giant of the continent and looking down on the world. Everyone was shocked. This was equivalent to raising Jiang Tian to the status of a giant of the 5 sacred grounds. Even the grand tutors and monarchs of the various empires would have to admit defeat. After all, there were many empires, but only one empire representative was qualified to talk to Gu He and the other giants on equal terms. "Grand Tutor, you must stay. Without you, the empire will not be at peace. You are the pillar of the empire, the stabilizing needle." Eastern Lu and the rest tried their best to persuade him to stay and even knelt on the ground to beg. They had feelings and rational considerations. Jiang Tian became the empire representative and had great power. Who would dare to offend the Eastern Empire? After all, this was his homeland. Moreover, Jiang Tian could mobilize a huge amount of resources in the future. Even if it was just a little bit, it would be enough for the Eastern Empire to eat until they were full. "I have made up my mind. The past me," Jiang Tian said with emotion, "I know my sins, but I'm also willing to bear the infamy. In order to give up my kindness, I use my sins and blood to open up a path for the common people and the common people, a path to rise. Let me bear all of this alone." In the next moment, Jiang Tian waved his hand and took out the Grand Preceptor's seal, the scepter, and many other ritual items from his storage ring and placed them on the table. "This is the strategy that I left for the Imperium. It is called the Spark New Policy. I hope that you will study it carefully." Jiang Tian once again took out a jade slip. He tapped the air and it floated into Eastern Lu's hand. "Sir, are you really leaving?" Eastern Lu solemnly accepted the jade scroll, his face full of reluctance. "I'm leaving." Jiang Tian sighed and said seriously, "Emperor, I owe the Lin family a great debt of gratitude. I want the Eastern Empire to guarantee them 100 years of glory and 1,000 years of peace. Do you agree?" "Of course I agree to this condition. Moreover, I will never violate it for generations. If I do, I will be at the mercy of Sage Siqing." Eastern Lu knelt down, followed by Dongfang Ding and Dongfang Li. "Farewell, everyone." Jiang Tian nodded with satisfaction and glanced at the crowd. Suddenly he waved his sleeve and wrapped Jiang Beibei and Dahe in it. He soared into the sky and disappeared from everyone's sight in the blink of an eye. This he actually left without saying goodbye? The lofty Grand Preceptor is second only to one person and above millions of people. He abandoned it just like that? He didn't just abandon the position of Grand Preceptor. He was a giant on this continent. The crowd couldn't believe it and was dumbfounded. But they didn't know. To Jiang Tian, St. Origin World was just a transit station on his way to the Central Galaxy. It was just a temporary stop. His mission in the Eastern Empire was almost complete. He came here to repay the kindness of the Lin family in his previous life and to make up for the regret of the Lin family's destruction. Now, The Lin family had received his personal teachings. The purple marquee was destroyed and the feudal system was abolished. The Lin family would be able to establish themselves in the Eastern Empire with the cultivation methods he taught them. In addition, there was the development trend of the Eastern Empire. Jiang Tian's abolition of the feudal system was equivalent to removing the shackles of development. The Eastern Empire would show an incomparably vigorous vitality and ambition. Under such circumstances, the pantheon of demons seemed powerful, but in fact, it had fallen into a disadvantageous position. Jiang Tian planned to stand by and watch the suppression of the demon race's rebellion. On one hand, he had confidence in the Eastern Empire and the Lin family. On the other hand, he wanted to destroy his enemies from his previous life and avenge his previous humiliation. For example, the Purple Marquis, Li Yichen, and other enemies had been mostly eliminated. Jiang Tian wasn't in a hurry to deal with the remaining enemies, such as Yan Nanxian. Yan Nanxian was indeed the culprit behind the destruction of the Lin family, but that was also because of the grudge between him and Yan Nanxian. Yan Nanxian failed to kill him and took his anger out on the Lin family. However, the fate of this life was completely different from his previous life. Yan Nanxian would not endanger the Lin family. Thirdly, he had to find Huang Linger and protect her. This was more or less done. Finally, he had to wait for the birth of that treasure and take it for himself. He had to take an important step and step into the divine transformation realm. And this had become Jiang Tian's top priority. After all, he had already walked the path of becoming a mortal for a long time. Everything was ready except for the east wind. Mr. Jiang. Wait. I have something to say to you. Fairy Qingjue, eldest princess Mou, and Dongfang Ying all soared into the air and chased after Jiang Tian. However, how could their movement speed compare to Jiang Tian's? Especially Dongfang Ying. Before they even left the city, they had already disappeared. Our Dongfang family has yet to repay your kindness. You have been here for less than a year. She looked up at the direction Jiang Tian left in, her beautiful eyes filled with tears, her face full of longing and reluctance. The hidden dragon trials are still waiting for you to preside over, and you're leaving just like that. Dongfang Mou chased out of the city and could not see Jiang Tian's figure. He could not help but turn pale. Even Fairy Qingjue could not see Jiang Tian after chasing for 1,000 miles. And this only took a few flicks of a finger. How can this be? You said that you want to become Dao companions with me, but you actually left so ambiguously. Could it be that what you said before was all a lie? Fairy Qingjue stood in the void, her clothes fluttering. Her expression was disappointed, and her eyes were filled with resentment and sorrow. 2 lines of clear tears slowly flowed down her jade-white cheeks. How vast was her divine sense! It swept across the vast sky and covered the vast earth, covering everything no matter big or small. However, there was no trace of Jiang Tian. Half a day later, Jiang Tian came to the east of the Dongfang Empire. At the edge of the Great Boundary Canyon, on top of a mountain peak in the evil-infested ridge, his vast divine sense suddenly spread out and peeped into the canyon. Chapter 2015. The evil-infested ridge was filled with ominous mountains and rivers. In the dense forest, there were towering trees that reached up to 100 zhang. The ground was filled with withered branches and withered leaves. The pine trees gently swayed without any wind. The needles were like teeth. The mottled bark was like the skin of a dying old man. It was horrifying and disgusting. All kinds of evil and dangerous auras filled the air. One could faintly see extremely tyrannical devil beasts roaming around. Devil beasts were originally demonic beasts, but because they were infected by evil energy, they mutated and transformed. They became even more violent and crazy. There was no beauty to speak of. Fuck, I fell into a trap. Standing on top of the evil-infested ridge and peeking at the Grand Canyon, past self Jiang Tian's heart was filled with evil thoughts. His heartbeat sped up and his mind was filled with hatred. He hated the heavens for being too fair, hated the earth for carrying things, hated people for being happy, hated things for not being his own, hated karma, hated fate for not being benevolent, hated that he didn't slaughter enough. He hated that he couldn't destroy all living things and kill the world. In the midst of his hatred, past self Jiang Tian's thoughts and ideas were all in chaos. It was as if his personality had split into 12,960, and each one was completely different. I should stay and spend a good night with Fairy Qingju. With the mortal world as my companion, I can live freely and freely. I can ride a horse and enjoy the prosperity of this world. I already have Zhao Xueqing, how can I be half-hearted? Plus, I have to jump out of the chess game of the 9 heavens and escape the fate of being a chess piece. I have to be the director of my own destiny. This is too hard to endure. Fighting against the heavens, fighting against the earth, and resisting the giants above the 9 heavens. Why not surrender? Just lie down and be an ant, isn't that better? Immortal Emperor, you are like a mouse hiding up there and playing tricks with your father. If you have the guts, then come down and kill me. Eat your mother, trash. Don't you know how to speak the language of the strong? Calm down, this is an illusion. You are about to have a split personality, how terrifying. If this is an illusion, then everything before is an illusion. You don't have a previous life, and you don't have a rebirth in this life. You have always been in Lin Zhou's mental hospital for treatment. Past self Jiang Tian painfully held his head. More than 12,000 voices were arguing with each other in his mind. It was as messy as a pot of boiling porridge. Those who had not experienced this would not be able to understand this kind of pain. In the heavens and on the earth, I am the only one who can control them. His voice was like thunder, like the evening drum and the morning bell, echoing in Jiang Tian's ears, turning into waves of divine sense, suppressing the evil thoughts in his heart. Was it because I, Jiang Tian, had arrived in time? His eyes were indifferent, like the eternal blue sky hanging high in the sky. His mouth spat out thunderous sounds, like the sound of the great Tao. He emitted divine sense fluctuations, helping me, Jiang Tian, to resolve the devil will. My spiritual undulations are even more profound. It seems emotionless, but it also seems emotionless. In his eyes, no one was inferior, and no one was more noble. Heaven and earth were heartless, and there was no difference. Tao was divine will rippled and turned into talismans surrounded by the aura of primal chaos, emitting an aura of creation. On these chaos talismans, there seemed to be Taoist lords and Buddhas sitting upright, with one hand pointing to the sky and the other pointing to the earth. In the heavens and on the earth, only I am supreme. Clang. A sound like a dragon's roar was heard. Behind him, Jiang Beibei and Dahe followed. Jiang Tian's original body had arrived. His gaze was deep, his expression was calm, and he hugged a guqin. He used his heart as the guqin, his 7 emotions as the strings, and his true intent to play, creating a soundless celestial sound, resonating with the others' hearts. Central Pine Illumination. A song was played. Jiang Tian felt that the surrounding scene had changed. It was no longer fierce mountains and rivers, nor was it haunted by devil qi and evil qi. A gurgling clear spring flowed past the spotlessly white stones, a round moon hung high in the pine forest, and a cool breeze blew, causing the pine trees to undulate and also his heart to sway. Soon after, overlooking the 9 heavens, boundless chant. Stargazing ocean. Heaven toppling over. Guqin sounds were heard, and one song after another was played. Fresh and refined, magnificent and transcendent scenes appeared in Jiang Tian's heart, interfering with his soul. Purging the evil thoughts in my heart, clearing my heart and calming my mind, external demons cannot invade, evil thoughts cannot enter, and worries are purified. Demonic Tao heart. I, Jiang Tian, shouted loudly, shaking the surroundings. The chaos became orderly, the filth became pure, and there was a clear glaze of light everywhere. Swallow. Jiang Tian was slightly stunned, and he shouted in a low voice, grabbing hold of the short moment of clarity. In his sea of consciousness, the soul-devouring demonic god suddenly opened its eyes, quickly swallowing the many distracting thoughts, absorbing and fusing with the personality that had just been split. Phew. After a while, Jiang Tian's face regained its calmness, and he slowly exhaled. The depravity, evil, and cruelty seemed to have become stronger. But his Tao heart was also more stable. Demonic Tao heart. This was a very strange state. Jiang Tian was closer to the devil Qi, as if they were one, and he had even entered the state of demonization. Of course, his physical body and dermic powers would not be contaminated by the devil Qi. But strangely, he maintained a Tao heart that was as calm as a rock. His thoughts were not disturbed or affected by external demons, and he did not lose himself or become confused. Since his Tao heart was not confused, he could combine knowledge and action, and his actions came from his heart. This place is really terrifying. Main body, are you really going to take that fiend as an opportunity for you to break through to the soul formation level? Jiang Tian sighed with emotion as he looked at the great threshold canyon. It was like a centipede with stitches, twisted and hideous. Its mouth was 1,000 feet wide and 1,000 feet long. It was silent and there was no other scenery, only an indescribable darkness. It seemed to be connected to the netherworld and the extremely terrifying fiend world universe. Even though Jiang Tian's Tao heart was more stable and heartless, it was difficult for him to look away when he looked at it. He was directly swallowed, and there was a trace of fear in his heart. He vaguely felt that it was a slightly rotating vortex, a huge vortex with no end in sight. It was far more terrifying than the abyssal fiend dragon from before. It's okay. I have a way to restrain this thing. Jiang Tian's true body calmly glanced at the canyon, then let out a soft cry of surprise and said, "This thing seems to have changed. I'm afraid it's going to be born soon. Maybe it'll only take 3 to 5 years. It's going to be born in advance? We should set up defenses here from now on. Only then can we seize the initiative." Jiang Tian revealed a serious expression. His clothes fluttered in the wind, making him look like an immortal. "No need." Jiang Tian shook his head and said calmly, "I'm going to continue to transform into a mortal. I'll leave behind a few surveillance Dharma artifacts to keep track of the movement of this thing." "Is there anything else to discuss?" Jiang Tian asked. Jiang Tian shook his head. "Let's fuse." Tao was said in a low voice. "We'll use the art of deceiving heaven and earth to hide our aura. We won't be able to do it for too long." "Okay. Fuse." Jiang Tian smiled. The three of them reversed their art of deceiving heaven and earth at the same time, and fused into one. "Dad, this place is so scary. Let's go." Jiang Beibei said softly. Okay, I'll bring you to see an acquaintance." Jiang Tian smiled. "Who?" "Your Auntie Ling." Chapter 2016. The easternmost part of the Saint Origin continent. Luoying sect. Immortal mountains and divine towers floated in the air. Rich spiritual energy fell like a waterfall, and vast magical power floated like a waterfall, giving people a beautiful and vast feeling. Below it there were mortal cities. The buildings were grand and imposing, and the aura of civilization was strong. On the streets, a large number of cultivators and mortals came and went. The traffic was endless, and there was a hubbub of voices. It was abnormally prosperous. Here, a large number of outer sect businesses were gathered. They worked day and night came. The entire sect, inside and outside, was filled with fireworks and silver flowers, and was brightly lit. Today was the annual anniversary celebration of the Luoying sect. In Wuzhou City, a large number of celebration activities were also held. In the city, along a vast river, there was a dragon boat race, a lantern show, and a fireworks show. The two sides of the river were brightly lit, and pedestrians were shuttling. A group of male and female cultivators restrained their magical power and turned into mortals. They walked along the river bank and played. When they saw something delicious, they went in to buy a few skewers, grilled fish, and the like. Occasionally, there were exquisite handmade products, such as rouge and face powder, which attracted their attention. A woman walked in the middle. She had an elegant temperament, and her face was beautiful and peerless, as if she was otherworldly. Along the way, she attracted a lot of attention. "Ling, look at the fireworks over there. It's so beautiful." A female cultivator pulled the beautiful girl and pointed to the opposite side of the river bank. Huang Linger looked up and saw that on the opposite side of the river, a cluster of fireworks rose up. It was like 1,000 flowers blooming on a night of the east wind. The light was like a river, and the stars were like rain. Beautiful! Countless onlookers saw this scene and rejoiced, revealing smiles. The fragrance of precious horses and carts filled the road. The sound of the flute moved, the light of the jade pot spun, and the night was full of fish and dragons. However, Huang Linger suddenly turned her head and looked to the side. In a corner where the lights were waning, there was a lone person sitting there. Beside that person was a flag with the words, "Waiting for Fate," written on it. Is he a fortune teller? Cultivators could sense the heaven and earth, and naturally had premonitions about the changes in the world. They could act on a whim or feel uneasy, and they could seek good fortune and avoid disaster. Naturally, his standard was far beyond that of a normal fortune teller. But for some reason, this time, Huang Linger walked in front of the fortune teller as if she was possessed by gods and devils. Even her several senior and junior sisters couldn't stop her. The light was dim. The fortune teller's face was old and his body was stooped. His eyes were dim and turbid, as if he had already lost his sight. However, Huang Linger had a very familiar feeling. She was stunned for a moment and didn't know what to say. "Hey, fortune teller. My little sister is here for fortune telling." One of the senior sisters was helpless in her heart. She could only cross her arms and speak fiercely. "You're mistaken, I'm not a fortune teller," the old man coughed and smiled. "Waiting for fate so that you can swindle others. If that's not a fortune teller, then what is it?" Senior sister scoffed. "I'm here, waiting for my lover from 10,000 years ago. I owe the people of 2 lifetimes, the old man said in a hoarse voice. "Your former lover? Owes the people of 2 lifetimes? Doesn't this mean that you're a reincarnated person? Moreover, your previous life was 10,000 years ago. After you reincarnated, you even saw your former lover. I'm afraid you'll have to reverse time and space. Do you think you're a mighty figure in the celestial world? Reverse time." The senior and junior sisters were all mocking him. As cultivators, they were not unfamiliar with rebirth and the like, but there were very few memories left after reincarnation. Reversing time and space to be reborn was too difficult. It was simply the biggest joke in the world. "Do you mean that your lover will appear? Look, don't I look like it?" The senior sister walked out. Although she was not on the 10 Beauties painting, she was still an enchanting and troublesome figure. Her waist was slender, her chest was high, and her beautiful face was hopeless and unfavorable. Many male cultivators were fascinated by her. In the end, her flirting was useless. The old man shook his head and raised his finger to point at Huang Linger. "She's my lover from 10,000 years ago." Everyone was surprised. Huang Linger blushed and said awkwardly. The old man nodded calmly. "Old blind man, how dare you think about my junior sister? Open your blind eyes and look carefully. My junior sister is the most beloved disciple of the Luoying sect leader Lian Huahan. Moreover, she's peerlessly beautiful and famous. She's on the 100 Flowers chart and the 10 Beauties painting. Are you worthy?" The senior sister raised her hand and pretended to hit him. "Get out of here or I'll kill you. Fairy, please forgive me." It's true that the old man made a mistake. This fairy is not her. My lover is billions of light years away from the Milky Way. But the old man doesn't have the heart to tease me. The old man seemed to be afraid and quickly apologized. "Senior sister, don't be angry. The old man was just joking with me." Huang Linger said softly. "I'll give you face. Otherwise, I'll stab him to death with a finger." Only then did the senior sister give up. "Old man, do I look like your lover?" Perhaps she had nothing to do. Huang Linger actually squatted down in front of the old man, supported her chin with her hand, looked at the old man's old face, and said softly, "Old man, can you tell me the story of you and her?" "Ling, what's so good about the story of a mortal old man? You can stay here and tease him. We'll go to the front first." The few senior sisters were not interested in listening to him. After saying goodbye, they strolled forward. I was born in a big family. I lived a life of luxury. But because of various reasons, I was exiled by the family. I gave up on myself and spent my days in the martial world, enjoying the pleasures of life. The old man spoke slowly. His face was calm, and his voice was vicissitudes of life. It was as if he instantly pulled people back to 10,000 years ago. At this time, a girl from a scholarly family, in order to pay off her father's debt, made a contract with me and became my contract lover. It seemed to be a business deal, but this girl actually had feelings for me, which I didn't expect. Huang Linger was suspicious from the beginning. Hearing this, her delicate body couldn't help but tremble violently. Her beautiful eyes were filled with tears, and she looked at the old man with infinite affection. She could already confirm that this old man was Jiang Tian. However, she had experienced too many twists and turns. She was no longer that naive and innocent girl. She instantly understood that with Jiang Tian's personality, if he didn't encounter an unimaginably strong enemy and an unsolvable dilemma, why would he hide himself like this? Therefore, she did not say a word and listened to the old man's narration. There was no need for Huang Linger to ask. Jiang Tian also told Huang Linger an important message as if he was telling a story. Jiang Tian went on an expedition to the ruins of immortality, reached the South Gate 2 Stars, and won a complete victory. The South Gate 2 Stars was now a colony of Earth. The Beidou demon clan's invasion of Earth failed. The entire Milky Way was centered around the solar system. It's okay. Our home is still there, our homeland is still there, and our old friends are all well. Hearing this, Huang Linger's heart surged. Tears flowed down, and her heart was filled with infinite sweetness. Chapter 2017. Alright, young lady, the story is over. I should be leaving to look for my previous lover. The old man kept the flag while trembling and spoke with a smile. Mister, take care. Will you be back? Huang Linger stood up and couldn't help but shed tears. They rolled down like broken pearls. At this moment, she had already thought through many things. Yang Dingtian must have been killed by Jiang Tian. However, in order to prevent that unparalleled giant from finding out Jiang Tian's true identity, he had no choice but to start a massacre at the state preceptor's housewarming banquet. She didn't know how much risk Jiang Tian had taken for this perfect plan. It was practically a narrow escape. Of course I will be back. This story isn't over yet. I want to give it a very happy ending. The old man smiled and staggered as he turned and walked towards the distance. Master? Immediately after, a young man and a young lady supported him. This is Bebe and Big Black. They are actually here too. Jiang Bebe had already changed her appearance and had grown up a lot. Big Black had also been reborn and had transformed into a human form. However, as though they were telepathic, Huang Linger immediately recognized the two of them. She was extremely excited and was filled with the pleasant surprise of meeting an old friend in a foreign land. Mister, I will wait for you to come back and tell me the second half of the story. Give me a perfect ending. Huang Linger looked at Jiang Tian's departing figure and muttered. Jiang Tian, Jiang Bebe, and Big Black disappeared once again. A few days later, Jiang Tian, Jiang Bebe, and Big Black, who had changed their appearances again, rented a small shop in Wuzhou City for 8 low-grade crystals and lived in seclusion again. To become a god, one had to become a mortal first. One had to experience life and walk in the mortal world to build a solid foundation. In fact, Jiang Tian had already walked very far on the path of becoming a mortal. However, he still wanted to walk for a while longer. He also took advantage of this period of time to make ample preparations for the birth of that treasure and the upcoming chaotic world. If the previous path of becoming a mortal in the Eastern Empire was to experience the height of the imperial court, then the upcoming path should be to experience the vastness of the pugilistic world. This time, he was a mortal without any cultivation. He was truly a small hermit who lived in the wilderness and a big hermit who lived in the city. The shop that Jiang Tian and the others rented was not on the main street, but in a remote alley. It was very remote and had very few people. In fact, due to its small size, it would be difficult to find it if one didn't look carefully. But Jiang Tian didn't mind. Jiang Tian opened a medicine store, so he would also take care of some simple injuries. The herbs that were sold had very thin spiritual energy. In this world, they were classified as herbs. The guests were naturally not cultivators. They were basically all the poor people in the surroundings, hunters, fishermen, woodcutters, and of course, there were also some craftsmen who worked for the outer sect. Jiang Tian was a doctor and pharmacist, and Dahe acted as a waiter. Jiang Beibei did some small chores as much as she could. In the blink of an eye, 2 months had passed. In the past 2 months, Jiang Tian was like an ordinary pharmacist. When the weather was good, he would go to the surrounding mountains to collect herbs. When he came back, he would cut the herbs, dry them, work at sunrise and rest at sunset. Without any cultivation, he was just like a real mortal. The surrounding neighbors also knew that the new master and his servants had come. The master was dressed as a middle-aged scholar. His surname was Jiang, and he never mentioned his name. He only said that he was an insignificant person who was not worth mentioning. Although he was not good at talking, he was extremely humble and kind, his medical skills were good, and the charge was reasonable. Chen Laoqi's chronic scabby head was cured, and he only charged 3 low-grade crystal stones. On this day, Jiang Tian was picking out the weeds among the medicinal herbs behind the counter when a groaning sound rang out. Soon after, the white wooden door that had been exposed to the wind and rain until its paint peeled off was pushed open. A young man with a dignified appearance limped in and cried out in pain. "Mr. Jiang, I'm so unlucky. My calf was bitten by a lynx. It hurts." "Hey Z, hurry up." Jiang Tian and Dahe quickly helped the young man sit down in a chair. When he rolled up his trouser legs, Jiang Beibei had already brought a jar of liquor. Jiang Tian said, "You have to bear with it. The lynx's saliva is poisonous. I have to bleed and disinfect your blood." "Okay." The young man took a rolled towel from Dahe, stuffed it into his mouth, and nodded heavily. He thought, Mr. Jiang is really kind, but why does this guy named Hazy smile so maliciously? It seems that he is waiting for me to make a fool of myself. Don't even think about it. Even if I pass out, I won't cry out. The young man made up his mind seriously. Jiang Tian began to squeeze the young man's wound, squeezing out half a bowl of black blood, disinfecting it with liquor, and then suturing it with catgut before applying ointment to the young man. "Young man, you are quite tough. You didn't make a sound. Don't do strenuous exercise for a week." Jiang Tian smiled and said, "Of course, a man will bleed and sweat, but not cry." In fact, the young man was in so much pain that tears came out. Hearing this, he grinned and squinted, and tears rolled down his cheeks. At this time, a middle-aged couple rushed in. "Sir, thank you very much. How much is it? I will pay you." The woman looked at the child with concern and asked a few questions. Seeing that the child was fine, she solemnly thanked Jiang Tian. "You're welcome. You don't have to pay. It's just a small matter. It's just ordinary herbs." Jiang Tian shook his head. "How can I accept it? Thank you so much." The woman bowed again and thanked him. "I told you not to go. Why did you still go? I tried to persuade you, but you didn't listen. Good words can't persuade a man who deserves to die." The man looked rough, with long hands and feet and calluses on his palms. He was wearing a leopard skin vest and rough boots made of wild boar skin. He seemed to be a hunter. He scolded the young man with a serious face. He probably said that there were a lot of lynx and leopards in the valley. He had warned the young man before, but the young man still went. The young man had a look of disdain. He rolled his eyes and argued with his father. "Fierce, fierce. The child is injured, and you only know how to be fierce. It has nothing to do with you. He just wants to become a good hunter as soon as possible." When the mother saw this, she suddenly threw a tantrum at her husband. "I'm doing this for his own good. I'm afraid something will happen to him. In front of Sir, you should at least give me some face." The man's face turned red, but he didn't dare to refute. He held it in for a long time before he said embarrassedly, "A typical henpecked husband." There was no running away. The woman snorted with a cold face. When she turned to Jiang Tian, she had a smile on her face. "Mr. Jiang, if you don't mind, come and have lunch with us. I've brewed fruit wine for half a year. It's not inferior to the ones in the restaurants outside." The woman was very grateful to Jiang Tian and wanted to repay him. "Yes, Mr. Jiang, you must come. I just hunted a mountain deer and sold the rest. Only one leg is left. Let's braise it. I also soaked fresh antler and deer blood with wine. It's very nutritious." The man also laughed heartily. An indescribable emotion rose in Jiang Tian's heart. It was different from when he interacted with Lin Hanqing and his son in the Lin residence. It had been a long time since he had experienced the warmth and kindness of strangers who had met by chance, the simple warmth of mortals. "Okay, I'm also a lazy person and don't like to cook. It would be impolite to refuse." Jiang Tian agreed with a smile. Chapter 2018. The hunter's house was diagonally opposite, less than half a mile away. Speaking of which, he and Jiang Tian could be considered neighbors. The courtyard of the house was not small. There were some wooden dummies, stone locks, knives, spears, sticks, and so on in the yard. This hunter often practiced with swords and spears, training his muscles and bones, and strengthening his body. This woman was young and had an ordinary appearance, but she was very capable and hardworking. The floor and stove were very clean, and her clothes had been starched and dried. Although the items in the house were very old, they were all wiped until they shone brightly. She was the kind of person who had a sharp tongue but a soft heart. From many details, it could be seen that she loved her husband and child deeply. The child was well behaved, and the couple loved each other dearly. In the yard, the young man was lying on a recliner, bragging to Jiang Beibei about his hunting results. The man accompanied Jiang Tian to drink tea and chat. They talked about some stories in Jianghu and interesting things on the street. Dahe helped the woman in the kitchen and called her big sister, in a very affectionate way. Soon, the banquet was set up. On the rough wooden table, there were mountain deer legs, wild rabbits, pheasants, and home-brewed fruit wine. The table was full of dazzling things. Next to the bonfire, there was half a wild boar. Its hair had been removed, and its skin was brushed with a layer of wild honey. It was roasted with fruit tree wood, and it was golden brown and fragrant. The hunter, Tai Nyo, smiled honestly and invited Mr. Jiang to take a seat. During this period, Jiang Tian stopped fasting and ate normally. Originally, since Jiang Tian was going to become immortal, he also hoped that Dahe would walk on the road of becoming immortal. He also needed to eat. However, this boy had not eaten or fasted. He secretly ate elixirs in the middle of the night, so he despised ordinary food. However, at this time, when he saw such a sumptuous meal, he couldn't help drooling. Jiang Tian ate the home-cooked meal that he hadn't eaten for a long time and drank the fruit wine that the couple was proud of. For the first time, he felt very peaceful. He seemed to have forgotten that the powerful people above the ninth heaven were coveting him, that Zhao Xueqing was taken away, that he had fought against the heavens, that he had forgotten his homeland, and that he had forgotten the cruel and bloody battles in his previous and current lives. At this moment, he was just Mr. Jiang, who was filling prescriptions and treating illnesses. He was making a living in this strange city with his daughter and a servant. In this glorious era, in the prosperous Saint Origin world, he was willing to be a nobody without any cultivation base and end his life in peace. However, his magic power was recovering 10 times faster than before. In fact, Sherwa was also injured in the battle with Suzhe and the others. After all, Suzhe was a true return to Void Stage Sage. Under normal circumstances, if Jiang Tian wanted to kill Suzhe alone, it would be a long and arduous battle. However, at that time, the late Jiang Tian wanted to show his divinity in front of the masses and intimidate others. He did not hesitate to burn his own blood essence to kill him in one strike. The price he paid was also disastrous. When the past self, and Tao self merged into one, the injuries would also be transferred to Jiang Tian's body. The truth was that his 3 nascent soul flowers had already withered and were on the verge of withering. However, at this moment, the petals were glowing and leveling up again, advancing towards their peak state. This wine was indeed good wine. It had the sweetness of the fruit, the coldness of the spring water, and the heat of the wine. From this day onwards, Jiang Tian's life had an additional wine flask with a yellow skin gourd. When he was picking herbs, treating illnesses, or brewing medicine, he would take a sip of the sweet and sour fruit wine. There would always be fruit wine in the flask. If the flask was almost empty, Ahu would run back home to fill it up and send it over. Occasionally, if the hunter Tainyo had some good food, he would cook it and call Jiang Tian's family over for a meal. He could also see that this Mr. Jiang's medical skills were very high and he was kind. However, no one was perfect. He also had a flaw, which was that he was extremely lazy. Jiang Tian would only cook every few days when he felt like it. Most of the time, he would just buy some meat and eat it with a pot of hot tea. The dust on the stove was as thick as a finger. Therefore, he didn't give Jiang Tian ingredients. Instead, he would call Jiang Tian to eat it. To Jiang Tian, this period of life was like a bowl of spring water. There was a hint of sweetness in the plain. This is the real transcendent mortal. Jiang Tian completely restrained his magic power. He even allowed his body to accept the erosion of time and the consequences of aging. He felt the gravity of the earth and completely forgot that he was a cultivator. However, in his heart, there was a sense of cleanliness that washed away all distracting thoughts. It was light and clean. Every morning, Jiang Tian would wake up early in the morning. He would carry the medicine basket and go to the nearby forest to collect herbs. If there were no patients in the pharmacy, he would be busy until the afternoon and return with the moon lotus hoe. In the deep twilight, he walked on the long and narrow winding mountain path. The branches and leaves of the plants on both sides of the path slanted out. The evening dew moistened the bottom of his pants and shoes. Time was like the clearest flowing water. Unknowingly, it flowed through the gaps of one's fingers. Gradually, half of the mortal citizens in Wuzhou City knew that there was a Mr. Jiang in the mud bottle alley. He was extremely effective in treating patients and fetching herbs. However, his fees were extremely low. When he was in a good mood, he would even do it for free. On this day, Jiang Tian just walked into the store and put down the medicine basket. His heart jumped. He saw a familiar figure. Mr. Lovesickness. Is it possible to cure it? Huang Linger stood up and walked over with light steps. For over a year, she had been suffering. Her complexion was haggard and looked as though she had lost her soul. In fact, after the previous encounter by the riverside, she waited for a few days. After waiting for a few days, she found a suitable reason to make a trip to the Eastern Empire. She finally verified that Jiang Tian was the state marshal Siqing. That battle that killed the saint, Su Zhu, was indeed to cover up the traces of Yang Dingtian's death. However, Jiang Tian had already hung the seal blade and was nowhere to be found. Huang Linger had been silently searching for Jiang Tian's traces. She had even passed through a few countries. Unexpectedly, Jiang Tian was in Wuzhou City under her sect and hadn't gone far. Fairy is a cultivator and is like a deity. I am unable to cure your illness. Jiang Tian acted as though he didn't know her and smiled indifferently. Mister, how would you know if you don't try? Help me take my pulse. Huang Linger extended her snow-white wrist. Her beautiful eyes were filled with tears. At this moment, she had a realization in her heart. The furthest distance in the world wasn't the galaxy of light years that couldn't be traversed and couldn't get close to each other. Instead, she had to act as though she didn't know him even though he was standing in front of her. At this moment, she hated the existence, behind the scenes, that she didn't know who he was. All right, I shall give it a try. Jiang Tian hesitated for a moment. Finally, he smiled bitterly, shook his head, and pressed his finger. Could it be that this is the feeling of ascending in broad daylight? Otherwise, why would someone bitterly pursue to become an immortal? Young lady is a cultivator and pursues the Tao of deity. Jiang Tian felt the subtle touch of her delicate and warm skin on his fingers, and his heart felt sour and touched. After a long time, he moved his hand away and said earnestly, "You're right. I might only be a mortal, but I have heard that those who have truly reached the peak of cultivation aren't as simple as immortality. Furthermore, they can turn back time and occupy all the possibilities of the past and future." It is as though there are billions of different lives. What is a mere temporary yearning? Chapter 2019. Sir, I've learned my lesson. When Huang Linger heard this, she forced herself to calm down. She also knew that her feelings for Jiang Tian were too infatuated. If she got too close to Jiang Tian, it was very likely that Jiang Tian's identity would be exposed, and he would be replaced by the powerful expert behind the scenes. From this point of view, it could even be said that she wasn't a qualified cultivator. One had to know that most cultivators were extremely rational. Don't worry, it won't take too long, Jiang Tian said with a smile. Of course, Jiang Tian also understood that Huang Linger also had to get rid of the shackles and jump out of the chessboard. Otherwise, she would also become his hindrance. After he broke through to the divine transformation realm, he was bound to leave Saint Origin World and continue to the core area where the 9 major immortal sects were located, looking for new opportunities to break through. He had to take Huang Linger with him. After all, he didn't feel at ease leaving her here alone. The real problem with taking Huang Linger away was that she had never changed her identity. It was easy for her to be used as a clue and be targeted by the immortal monarch. Jiang Tian had also thought of a way to deal with this. That was Huang Linger faked her death to escape, and then cultivated the deceiving heaven and earth mysterious technique to conceal her aura. She could transform into a fish and dragon without a trace and live with another identity. Thank you for your advice. Huang Linger restrained her emotions, calmed down, and got up to leave. It was a dark night with no moon. The stars were even brighter. In the past year, Jiang Tian could clearly feel that his mentality was slowly getting rid of the life of a cultivator and becoming the same as that of a mortal. For example, nowadays he rarely meditated. This was something that was impossible in the past. Whether it was in his previous life or now, he had been diligently cultivating, using all the time he had to improve his cultivation. His life was full of intrigue, and the weak were prey to the strong. The slightest carelessness could lead to death. He had almost never laid down to sleep like this. Even late at night, he only spent it in meditation. This kind of life, although exciting and passionate, had a trace of regret and a trace of peace. It was incomplete and twisted. And now, it seemed like the path of transcendent mortal had given Jiang Tian a reason to rest. There were no fights in his life. Although his life was ordinary, it was like a trickling stream that cleansed his soul. At first, Jiang Tian was extremely unfamiliar with this feeling. But as time slowly passed, his mentality gradually accepted the current situation and he began to live the life of a mortal. Jiang Tian sipped his fruit wine as he lay on a bamboo chair in the courtyard, looking up at the starry sky. The world was unhurried and boundless. The universe was deep and profound. He couldn't sense a single human figure or any traces of civilization. They were so magnificent. Compared to this, he himself was so insignificant. However, it was precisely this kind of insignificant cultivator that, upon reaching the return to void stage, would possess an inner world of its own. With a wave of his hand, he could destroy everything in his line of sight. Even continents, stars, and stars could be nurtured. This contradictory comparison was one of the problems that Jiang Tian had faced previously. It was also a dilemma that he had to solve in order to become a transcendent mortal. The mentality of an ordinary person and the strength of a transcendent would naturally produce all kinds of feelings of confusion and hesitation. However, the mentality of a transcendent wouldn't allow one to abandon one's personality and way of doing things and become a stone without any fluctuations in one's emotions. One could only use the past as a foundation to reconstruct one's outlook on life and values and integrate it with one's soul. Only then would one be able to walk further and better and not be disturbed by the inner demons. For example, as one's lifespan increased, compared to mortals who hadn't lived past 100 years, one would feel a sense of dissonance between the short and long periods of time, as though they weren't the same kind of life form. Currently, Zhang Xian's cultivation was advancing by leaps and bounds. After reincarnating, he wasn't even 100 years old yet, so this feeling wasn't too obvious. But thinking back to his previous life, after reaching the age of 500, Many Foundation establishment cultivators he knew had either died or passed away. In fact, in his previous life, after he ascended to the firmament, he passed by the solar system, and the entire solar system was destroyed by the eye. At that time, how should he adjust to the changes in his feelings? In his previous life, Jiang Tian hadn't been able to figure out this problem for a very long time. Viewing the short period of brilliance and the long period of time correctly was the most important thing in cultivating one's soul. Putting aside ascending to the immortal realm, there were many cultivators who only reached nascent soul or divinity transformation. They would view themselves as the high and mighty deities and treat mortals as ants. There were also some who didn't interact with them at all. Life forms of different levels didn't share a common language. There was no right or wrong in this, but Jiang Tian didn't like it. What he admired the most was the attitude of a senior. Sentimental but not tired. He didn't think highly of himself and looked down on mortals indifferently. He also didn't cry because of the end of his friends' lifespans. He enjoyed it but didn't indulge in it. In this aspect, the death of one's wife was the epitome of this attitude. At the same time, it could be said that he had seen through the mysteries of life and death. As his thoughts drifted, Jiang Tian's mind seemed to be lively and calm. There was an indescribable sense of beauty in it. He felt that his soul was expanding endlessly. Every single blade of grass and tree, every single branch and leaf was filled with sentiments. He had reached a state where one could see the vastness of the universe and feel pity for the greenery. If not for the shackles of his physical body, he would be able to create unique objects with just his imagination alone. The feeling of transcendent mortal is truly mysterious. The transcendent mortal in my previous life wasn't even a tenth of what I am doing now. With a calm mind, Jiang Tian actually felt a trace of fatigue. In fact, this kind of fatigue was something he had never felt before. When he closed his eyes, a thought appeared in his mind. However, transcendent mortal isn't enough. From tomorrow onwards, I will seal my cultivation completely and walk the path of transcendent mortal to its limits. When he woke up the next day, Jiang Tian took a deep breath and suppressed his cultivation completely. In an instant, the cries of customers, haggling, and chatting in the streets and alleyways drilled into his ears. It was hard to distinguish one from the other, but it had lost the sense of clarity it had in the past. With his ear aperture closed, it was difficult for him to distinguish between so many sounds. All he could feel was a chaotic mess and his head was spinning. In fact, the feeling of heaviness was extremely strong. It was as though he was carrying 1,000-gene burden on his shoulders, making it difficult for him to even move his hands. Even though he hadn't truly lost his cultivation completely and was only suppressing it, he still felt a little frustrated and flustered. This is the true feeling of a mortal. The feeling of lightness is gone, and the gravity of reality is truly frightening. The heck, Kong Teichu, what's wrong with you? You are a person who has lived 2 lives and cultivated for 10,000 years. Why have you lost even this sense of normalcy? Jiang Tian couldn't help but berate himself. Could it be that the perfect state of mind that he had tempered through countless trials and tribulations was really so illusory, built entirely on his fearsome strength? Where was the comprehension of life and death? Where was the generosity to face difficulties? Where was the patience to remain calm and composed? As such thoughts surfaced in his mind, Jiang Tian gradually regained his composure. He was no longer at a loss. Chapter 2020. The sky was clear and the air was clear. Jiang Tian carried the medicine basket and was about to go to the mountain to pick herbs. However, before leaving, Jiang Tian called Iron Bull to go with him. Thank you for thinking so highly of me, Mr. Jiang. This is the first time you've asked me to go with you. Iron Bull said happily. Haha, it's not so boring to have a companion. Jiang Tian's face twitched. That's because I sealed my own cultivation. I can't deal with those gray wolves on the hero's slope right now. Sure enough, after sealing one's cultivation and completely turning into a mortal, one's mentality would be different. On the contrary, one's connection with the mortal world would be closer. The two of them went together to a breakfast shop to eat breakfast. Suddenly, they heard a sigh in their ears. The court bulletin says that the Eastern Empire has completed the transition from a marquis system to a county system. The hidden dragon trials are open to all ambitious people. Regardless of whether they are commoners or descendants of marquises, they all have to participate in the trials. Only by obtaining a ranking can they be rewarded. Jiang Tian turned his head to look. This was a man around 30 years old. He remembered that he was the accountant of a subsidiary company of the Luoying sect. His appearance was ordinary and he had no cultivation, but he was full of energy. He was holding a court bulletin and reading it. This court bulletin was like the newspapers on Earth, but it was aimed at mortals without cultivation. Cultivators usually used communication magic tools to send messages, and it would arrive in an instant. The news on the court bulletin was also leaked from cultivators' mouths. The authenticity was very high, but it was slightly delayed. However, it also had its advantages. It didn't require magic tools and was printed on ordinary paper, so the price was low. The hidden dragon trials have been changed to once a year. This time, it has attracted a large number of cultivators into the Eastern Empire. Jiang Tian smiled faintly and said, "Actually, in my opinion, the Eastern Empire has already become a large sect. However, the sect's mission is for cultivators to fight for the common people." He didn't stop eating breakfast and casually interjected like ordinary neighbors chatting. Although he was located in the far east of the continent and was very far from the Eastern Empire, he could still easily inquire about relevant information. The Eastern Empire had already completely abolished the marquis system and changed to a county system. They also set a national policy of cultivators fighting for mortals. The hidden dragon trials were open and open. Regardless of background, anyone could participate. As such, the Eastern Empire was able to recruit a large number of talents. In the beginning, only nascent soul cultivators joined, but in the end, even soul formation cultivators joined. Furthermore, the test of the hidden dragon trials was aimed at the pantheon of demons. Surprisingly, the hidden dragon trials had achieved quite a lot, crushing the pantheon of demons. Judging from the current situation, it was only a matter of time before the pantheon of demons was destroyed. Mr. Jiang is right. Right now, the Eastern Empire is implementing the two national policies of fairness and independence left behind by Imperial Advisor Siqing. A single spark can start a prairie fire. It is known as the Spark Revolution. The accountant was also extremely respectful to Jiang Tian. He cupped his hands, nodded vigorously, and said with an excited smile, "They established the Starfire Academy, and anyone can apply for it. As long as they have the aptitude, are willing to work hard, and pass the examination, they can enroll for free. However, they must sign a soul contract and serve the Eastern Empire in the future, when they participate in the hidden dragon trials. Although it is a condition, serving the Empire and participating in the hidden dragon trials to become an official is not a bad thing in the first place. Many commoners want this opportunity but don't have it. The most important thing is this free cultivation academy. It is really too good. The Luoying sect is so rich. Apart from those with exceptional talent, even if you have the cultivation of nascent soul stage, you still have to pay a tribute to enter the sect." As soon as his words fell, many diners around him immediately echoed his words. You all know Qi Laosen from Stone Alley, right? He was originally a refugee with a poor family. However, when he participated in the Starfire Academy's examination, he was actually tested to have a 9th grade spirit root. He has only been in the academy for a year, but he has already cultivated to the foundation building stage. I heard that many countries have begun to learn from the hidden dragon trials reforms. For example, the Black Moon Empire. Now, many sects have also begun to reduce their tributes so that they can recruit disciples. This Imperial Advisor Siqing is truly a genius. I heard that he explained in the Spark Revolution that people are the most important factor in cultivation. Just listen to it, it is simply enlightening. From the looks of it, in 10 years, or even a few decades, everyone in our Saint Origin continent may be able to cultivate. Everyone was talking at once, vying to express their own opinions. The great changes in the past few days were mostly caused by Imperial Advisor Siqing's reforms in the Eastern Empire. Jiang Tian was secretly pleased with himself. When he paid the bill and left, his footsteps became lighter. Who knew that he would slip and fall, but was supported by the bookkeeper beside him. This shop is very dirty. The water used to wash the pot is poured on the road. It is very wet and slippery. Sir, you must be careful. The bookkeeper smiled as he gave the order. The corner of Jiang Tian's mouth twitched. He wanted to laugh but couldn't. His heart was full of sighs. He had already noticed the slipperiness of the ground, but after so many years, when had he ever paid attention to such a small matter? Not to mention this level of slipperiness, even if it was a 10,000 miles wide lake, he could still fly through the air with his eyes closed and fight with his body agilely. Unfortunately, it was not the same as before. Other than knowledge, he had no skills at all. He had to be more vigilant about small matters that he didn't care about in the past. Therefore, not only could he not rely on his cultivation, but he also couldn't completely rely on his past experience. Because Jiang Tian had sealed his cultivation, he was actually so tired that he was panting and sweating profusely. His legs were even trembling a little. This kind of exhaustion was something that Jiang Tian had not experienced for many years. However, it made Jiang Tian feel a kind of peace and carefree as a human. At night, after washing off the dust on his body, Jiang Tian slept very soundly. In the room of an inn in the city, a black-robed man who had been closing his eyes suddenly opened his eyes. The darkness in his eyes was suffused with a bright silver color. It was somewhat sacred and indifferent. Like the clearest mirror, it reflected everything in his surroundings, including illusions that were difficult to see with the naked eye. For example, the strength of his qi and blood, the mist-like yin qi, and the ghosts embedded in the wall with only their faces exposed. Wu Wang-I has finally reached the small success stage. The black-robed man said to himself happily and slowly got up. He was a strong heterodox cultivator. In order to cultivate this magical power, he had suppressed all kinds of desires for several years. Now that he had achieved perfection, he had to vent and celebrate. According to his observation, no one in this small city of Wuzhou could block his attack. Pushing open the window, the black-robed man jumped into the middle of the street, as light as a leopard cat. Looking at the slightly flickering lights on both sides and the quiet street, he recalled all the things he knew before. He slowly walked forward, full of satisfaction, as if he was the master of all life in this small city. After all, the Luoying sect is above. There are cultivators patrolling from time to time, so I still have to be careful. He thought about the details, thought about it, passed by the hunter Tainyo's family and walked forward. He had also been in Wuzhou City for a few days. Although Mr. Jiang, who opened the medicine shop, seemed to have no cultivation, he always had some inexplicable feelings when he sensed it. For the sake of seriousness, he started with him. Stopping at the door of the medicine shop, he slowly opened the door. Silently, his eyes swept to the bed, full of bloodthirst and cruelty. He saw the figure of Jiang Tian sleeping on the bed. He raised his right palm and was about to make a move. Chapter 2021. But at this moment, his eyes of innocence reflected an image that was different from what the naked eye could see. The sleeping figure was surrounded by a purple-gold true dragon, coiling in circles, layer after layer, overlapping each other. It was at least 1,000 feet long. Its scales were like precious gold, shining with a frightening metallic luster. Its horns were lofty, and golden lotuses were growing on the ground. It was asleep with its eyes closed, but when it breathed, it spurted out thunder and lightning. All kinds of images were vivid and shocking. The black-robed man was sweating and instinctively stepped back. He hit the door with a thud and said in panic, "The protection of the 9th true dragon?" This seemingly ordinary, kind-hearted man who mingled well with his neighbors actually had a real dragon as his pet. Where did he come from? Is he an immortal from the 9th heaven or a Buddha? The sound of the door knocking woke Jiang Tian up. Years of habit made him quickly turn over and sit up, putting on the most suitable posture for action. He narrowed his eyes slightly and looked at the black-robed man in front of him, while the sound of "the protection of the 9th true dragon" echoed in his ears. Dahe's strength was extraordinary and its bloodline was amazing, but after all, it had played the role of a big black dog for so many years. Like other pets, it was used to snuggling up to its master. At night, when Jiang Tian was asleep, it ran to the bed at Jiang Tian's feet. However, it was in a deep sleep. It dispersed the restraint of the shape-shifting skill and turned into the true dragon. In a short time, he had outlined the general process of the matter. Facing the panic-stricken black-robed man, Jiang Tian smiled and said, "How can you enter without asking for permission?" The scene in front of him was in a trance. The real dragon was no longer there, but a big black dog. However, the black-robed man was still frightened and instinctively shook his head. You have no cultivation at all. How can you be protected by the 9th true dragon?" He felt that he had to know the reason before he died. Jiang Tian sat down and said with a smile, "You might not believe it, but I used to be an expert of my generation. Because I was facing a bottleneck and couldn't break through, after thinking about it, I finally understood that cutting off my greatest reliance, which was my strength, was the shortcut to see my true self. As for the protection of the 9 heavens true dragon, it was because it was a pet I took in when I was still a cultivator. I want to experience the feeling of a mortal without cultivation. Even if it kills me, don't come out to help." He waved his hand, and Dahe left and returned to his room. Bluff, deliberately mystifying things. The black-robed man was stunned, and then he laughed uncontrollably, which woke several people. After a long time, he gasped and said, "You must have scared me with illusion. There's no 9th heaven purple gold true dragon. It's just a black dog. Do you think I am stupid? How can I be an idiot? This joke. I am such an idiot, Jiang he thought. Only by destroying my own martial arts can I see my true self? Self-destruction is the only way to die," the black-robed man continued to laugh. "All cultivators understand that the most real reliance in the world is the strength that is cultivated bit by bit. How can you give it up to see your true self?" Jiang Tian thought for a while and said, "Haotian Taoism once divided the tribulations into many categories. There are different kinds of thunder tribulations, tribulations of yin wind and earth fire, tribulations of man involving karma, tribulations of 3 lives related to the past and future, and void tribulations when you suddenly lose all your divine sense and dharma power. At that time, can you still rely on your cultivation? Once you encounter the void tribulations, will you just wait for death and not for yourself? That's different. If it's a tribulation, you can prepare treasures to block it, invite friends to protect you, and make a perfect plan. As long as you get through that period, you will naturally recover. It's not the same as destroying your own cultivation to find the illusory true self." The black-robed man shook his head and sneered. He still felt that this master, who was protected by gods and Buddhas, was joking with him. There must be a master with great divine sense who could make him unaware of his martial arts. But how could there be a master who would do such a stupid thing as destroying his own cultivation? Jiang Tian said seriously, "What if the void tribulations last for 1 year, 5 years, or even 10 years? How can there be such a long tribulation?" The black-robed man didn't believe it at all. Jiang Tian didn't argue and said with a smile, "Aren't I the same as what you said? I can get the protection of the 9th heaven purple gold true dragon, have treasures that can automatically protect me, and if I want to do something, there are not many people in the world who are willing to help me and not abandon me because of the loss of my strength. I just need to know myself again, know the world, and adjust the habits that came from cultivation. What's the difference between this and the void tribulations? But others can recover once the tribulation is over. Destroying one's own cultivation is a slim hope. It's more like giving up on oneself." The black-robed man still couldn't accept this choice. For a martial arts cultivator, strength is life, strength is everything. Jiang Tian didn't answer directly. Instead, he looked out of the window and pointed to the floating mountains of the Luoying sect and said, "When I had cultivation, I could walk in the sky and go to the Luoying sect that is tens of thousands of miles away was just a matter of time. Now, if I want to go there, I can either ask for help or find a refining sect and use their ingenious magical artifacts to travel. Then he pointed to the dark mountain peak again. Look at the steep mountain peak over there. When I had cultivation, it was just a step. Now, if I want to climb up, I have to be prepared and cross mountains and rivers to get there. In the past, when I wanted to do something, I could do it myself. Even if I was far away, I could do it from a distance. Now, I have to take a detour and waste people's time. Many of my past experiences, habits, and cognition collapsed in front of my eyes with the loss of my cultivation. I have to reconstruct them to match the current situation. So, I have to understand what the pattern is and what the outside is. I have to rely on them but not rely on them. I have to be limited by them and cover my eyes. His voice was low and his tone was normal. He described all kinds of changes that seemed to be natural. The black-robed man was in disbelief at first, but gradually he fell into deep thought. It seemed that there was some truth in what he said. He responded from time to time. Jiang Tian continued to talk. Unknowingly, the east was slightly bright and the sky was burning. The black-robed man suddenly frowned and said, "You said so much. Are you trying to persuade me to seal my cultivation and become a mortal like you?" "No, I'm just comforting myself." Jiang Tian laughed self-deprecatingly and waved his hand. The eyes of innocence is a Taoist supernatural power. It focuses on the unity of the body and mind and not being blinded by desire. Even if you master it, if you let it go, you will regress. Take care of yourself. "You're right, sir." The black-robed man did not dare to disobey and retreated out of the cabin. All kinds of desires in his heart had long disappeared after listening to the lecture in the fog. There were many people who woke up early in the morning. They were talking and laughing. The morning fog was thin and the sun was shining brightly. The black-robed man seemed to wake up with a start and said to himself in shock, "What did I do? Did I just listen to that lunatic talk nonsense for the entire night? And I feel that what he said makes sense. Didn't I want to rob and rob? How could I forget?" Chapter 2022. After waving his hand to let the black-robed man leave, Jiang Tian turned his gaze to the window. He looked at the rising sun and the dazzling morning glow, seeming to be enlightened. After a few breaths, he turned his head back and looked at the empty door. He listened to the bustling morning. When he sensed that everything was peaceful, he exhaled quietly, as if he had gone through a fierce battle. "It's really not easy," he sighed to himself. If Jiang Tian wanted to experience the feelings of a mortal, he would really seal his cultivation and not let Dahe help him. He had to use his ability to deceive. Combined with his past experience and some insights he gained from sealing his cultivation, he dragged the black-robed man out for a night and eliminated all kinds of desires in his heart. At the same time, he used the requirements of the eyes of innocence to bind the black-robed man with half-truth and half-bluff. In this half of the night, he seemed to be an otherworldly expert, talking about what was external and what was true self. He was carefree and deep, but in fact he was mentally exhausted and worried about every step. He was afraid that the black-robed man would not be attracted by what he said, but he was also worried that he would go too far and cause a backlash. There were no fists, kicks, or swords. This night's chat did not seem like a fierce battle, but it was true, although the black-robed man might not feel it. "Fortunately, I still have a mouth." Jiang Tian touched his temples, feeling a little self-deprecating and self-satisfied. In his previous life, when he was in the university dormitory, he was addicted to martial arts and fantasy novels. He was the best at livening up the atmosphere, gossiping, and fooling around among his roommates. He led a group of them astray, and they joked that he only had a mouth left. They told him quite sincerely that in ancient times, Confucius became a sage and was known as Confucius. Today, there was the king of talking, so he should be known as Mouth. Sure enough, without martial arts, he had to change his attitude, way of thinking, and way of dealing with things. After this night, Jiang Tian had a deeper understanding of the path of becoming immortal. It was not his cultivation that blinded his eyes, but his experience, habits, inherent cognition, and instinctive judgment formed after relying on his cultivation that interfered with his mind. Under certain circumstances, they were very correct, but if one completely believed in them and followed them, they would inevitably be conservative and stubborn. Sooner or later, they would reach the threshold without knowing it, and from then on, they would be stuck. It was precisely because of this that a true transcendent mortal, severing one's self to see one's true self, didn't mean giving up on one's cultivation and strength. Instead, it was to see through the limitations and see through the limitations of the Dharma. Once he broke through and saw his true self, he would be able to completely control his cultivation and strength. He would be able to control it and not be restrained by it. It was like building a boat to cross the sea, but when you reached the other side, you didn't let go of the boat. That was putting the cart before the horse, confusing the means and the purpose. This kind of thing was not something that could be easily seen through. The experience, cognition, and habits that were almost ingrained into one's instincts would always play a role unknowingly, moistening things silently. It was very difficult for one to notice the difference. Even if he had a corresponding thought in his mind, he wouldn't be able to recognize it. After all, those closely involved cannot see the game clearly. It would take a long time to examine it bit by bit before it could be seen through. It was enough to be called a big problem on the path of cultivation. This was a true transcension of mortals, and it wasn't a superfluous move. Instead, it was a rewarding one. By giving up the strength of cultivation, the contradiction between the experience, cognition, habits, and reality directly surfaced. Although it was intense, it was indeed quite obvious. It made the heart that had been stubborn after many years of cultivation become lively and quick-witted, allowing him to experience completely different experiences from time to time. Time passed quickly. Like flowing water, day and night flew by quickly. In the blink of an eye, another 4 years had passed. This was already Jiang Tian's 7th year in the capital. Tainyo's son, Ahu, grew taller and taller. His body became stronger and stronger. He turned from a teenager into a young man. Jiang Beibei also grew up a lot. She was already a budding young girl with a slim figure. It was obvious that she was a beauty in the making. There were a few fewer and a few more neighbors around them. The boss of the Kong family's textiles shop passed away because of a serious illness. The shop was sold to someone else. Old Zhao quit the Zhao family's blacksmith shop and passed it on to his eldest son. Slight wrinkles gradually appeared on the faces of Ahu's parents. Although they were still young, they couldn't stand the washing of time. It was worth mentioning that in the past 2 years, many of the neighbors had come up to Jiang Tian to propose marriage. Although Jiang Tian had a daughter who wasn't young, she looked quite young. Moreover, her medical skills were extraordinary and her medicine was miraculous. In the eyes of mortals, she knew many cultivators. That was already very impressive. Every time, they were tactfully rejected by Jiang Tian. Spring went and autumn came, and the sun and moon alternated. In the past few years, Jiang Tian saw birth, old age, illness, and death. He felt rather emotional in his heart. He had already recovered the 3 ultimate flowers, but in the past 2 years, he had only meditated and breathed out twice. He didn't even care about his own cultivation. It had been a long time since he used his inner vision to check. In the past 2 years, Jiang Tian's medicine shop gradually became famous in the entire Wuzhou city. Although there weren't many customers, it was still much better than not opening for a year. However, now, in Jiang Tian's medicine shop, most of the people who came were not mortals, but cultivators. Basically, 6 out of 10 people would be martial cultivators. They found that the herbs that Jiang Tian mixed, even if the spiritual qi wasn't that rich, could still heal many cultivators' injuries. It was even very beneficial for cultivation. The matter of Wuzhou City having an extraordinary person gradually became famous in the cultivation world here. Jiang Tian's mentality was always calm and there was no change. What he sought was the mentality of a mortal, to experience a mortal's life and feel the reincarnation of the heavenly Tao. The medicine shop was only a tool for him to comprehend the heavenly Tao. It was the same for seeing patients and getting herbs. At this time, seeing that the new year was coming, Wuzhou City was decorated with lanterns and colored banners. New peaches were replaced with old talismans. Jiang Tian walked out of the shop and sat at the door of the shop, looking at the pedestrians outside. In his eyes, there was a deep reminiscence. This was the 7th New Year he had spent in Wuzhou City. Every time, the feeling was different. However, there was only one thing, and that was the nostalgia for his childhood. In those years, in the Milky Way galaxy that was light years away from the Milky Way, on that vast blue planet, the Lunar New Year there was really full of New Year's atmosphere. In the hunting shop diagonally opposite the shop, Ahu quickly ran out, holding some fireworks in his hand. He brought a few children to play excitedly. Seeing Ahu, Jiang Tian's eyes revealed a trace of joy and relief. He had watched this child grow up in the past few years, from an 11-year-old child to an 18-year-old young man. Last year, Ahu could not stand his father's nagging and gave up his dream of hunting. He began to learn how to forge iron tools from a blacksmith on the street. This way, he would be more peaceful. However, once he had free time, he would still run to Jiang Tian's place to watch him treat people and get medicine. Although Ahu did not come often, a pot of fruit wine every day had never been stopped. While setting off fireworks, Ahu shouted and ran to Jiang Tian's side. He sat down on the cold wooden stool next to him and did not feel cold. Instead, he winked and said, "Uncle Jiang, a few days ago, I heard from my father that shopkeeper Liu in the east wanted to betroth his daughter to you. Why didn't you agree? I secretly saw his daughter. She was very beautiful." Jiang Tian smiled slightly, touched the youth's head, and said, "Uncle has a wife. Otherwise, how could I have your sister Bebe?" "Ah? Really? She's still alive. I thought she had already passed away." Ahu stood up with a swoosh, his face full of surprise. "She's waiting for me in a place far away. One day I'll go find her." Jiang Tian's eyes revealed a trace of tenderness, and a figure of Zhao Xueqing's back appeared in his mind. "I know. You must have had a child before marriage and were not accepted by your aunt's family. You came to Wuzhou City to do business and prepare to make a lot of money so that you can go back and marry her." Ahu laughed and imagined a lot of plots that he had heard from plays. Chapter 2023. Jiang Tian couldn't help laughing. He nodded and said, "Yes, when I make a lot of money, I'll go back and marry a wife." But he was thinking that his wedding with his previous life and this life was hasty. If they reunited one day, would he give her a grand wedding? It didn't need to be too grand. He just wanted to blow up a few stars as fireworks and shock the whole universe. "Where are Bebe and Dahe? Why didn't they spend the new year with you?" "What? They have something to do." Jiang Tian smiled bitterly. Jiang Bebe had begun her first closed-door training to break through to the Foundation realm. However, this closed-door training place was not at home. Jiang Tian didn't accompany her, but let Dahe guard her. Therefore, he was alone at home at this time. "In that case, uncle, let's go to my house for New Year's Eve dinner." Ahu was about to speak. At this time, his father, Iron Bull, called from his new blacksmith shop diagonally across the street. Ahu quickly responded and said to Jiang Tian with a bitter face, "Uncle, I'm sorry." Uncle Jiang, I have to forge again." As he spoke, he helplessly returned to the ironware shop. From the shop, Ahu's father's reproach came out. Jiang Tian took a sip of wine and sat at the door, listening quietly. At this time, some snowflakes gradually fell from the sky. Gradually, the snowflakes became bigger and bigger. The first snow of this year fell silently from the sky. The temperature suddenly dropped. The snowflakes hit Jiang Tian's face and quickly melted into ice water. Jiang Tian looked up at the dusky sky. After a long time, he stretched out his right hand and casually clenched it. Suddenly, the surrounding snowflakes instantly gathered. Jiang Tian took a deep breath and released his right hand. The snowflakes immediately collapsed and drifted around again. This scene happened so fast that no pedestrians noticed anything unusual. They just lowered their heads and hurried on. As the sky darkened and the lights came on, there were fewer pedestrians on the street. In the end, there was no one on the whole street. Even the surrounding shops were closed early due to the heavy snowfall and the New Year's Day. They no longer did business. The family gathered around the stove to warm themselves, eat New Year's Eve dinner, drink wine, and talk cheerfully. This warmth was not only physical, but also spiritual. The warmth of a family reunion could drive away any coldness. Jiang Tian's eyes gradually revealed a hint of loneliness. The coldness brought about by the snowflakes was insignificant to him. However, at this moment he looked at the surrounding shops that lit up one by one. On the entire street, only his shop was pitch black. Suddenly, a trace of coldness rose in his heart. This kind of coldness was not something that could be dispelled by any fire source, nor was it something that could be made up for by any divine ability or spell. This kind of coldness was the price to pay for comprehending the heavenly Tao. It was a necessity to experience life. If he wanted to become a divinity, he had to become a mortal first. However, even though it sounded easy, how could it possibly be that simple? Right now, Jiang Tian was experiencing the feeling of loneliness. His parents were billions of light years behind him in the Milky Way, on that small blue planet. Qing'e was in the distant core area of the central galaxy. She was thousands of miles away and it was difficult to see her. It was as if he was floating alone in the Saint Origin world. He could not see his old friends in front of him, nor could he see anyone behind him. Thinking about the endless world, he cried alone. He knew that this kind of loneliness would continue to haunt him until the day he jumped out of the chessboard of fate. Jiang Tian was silent for a long time before he staggered to his feet. At this moment he seemed to have aged a little. He slowly tidied up the chairs at the door, returned to the shop, and gently closed the door. "I can't let go. I can't let go." Jiang Tian looked at the cold pot and stove. In his mind, the scene of his family gathering and the lively scene of the disciples surrounding him appeared. He could not help but mumble to himself, his eyes lost focus. When he was cultivating in his previous life, he could not let go of his family. Now that he was reborn, he still could not let go. However, this kind of feeling was different from back then. If he wanted to reach the soul formation stage, he had to first become immortal. If he really let go of his family and everything, it would be impossible for him to become immortal. But why should I let go? The corner of Jiang Tian's mouth curved into a smile of enlightenment. Every soul formation cultivator was powerful not only because of their cultivation, but also because of the deeply hidden feelings in their hearts. Feelings but not tiring. They did not cut off their 7 emotions and 6 desires, but they also did not cry because of a short separation or the death of a loved one. They enjoyed their feelings but did not indulge in them. It was this kind of emotion that allowed them to become immortal. Using this emotion, they could break through the nascent soul stage and reach the soul formation stage. It was because of this obsession that Jiang Tian did not encounter too many setbacks in becoming immortal. Instead, he gradually felt the feeling of being immortal. At this moment, he was immersed in the longing for Qing'e, Ling, his parents, and his homeland. He quietly felt this feeling. The magic power in his body began to rotate crazily again. This rotation gradually spread out of his body. Above all the herbs in the shop, a trace of spiritual energy suddenly rose. It fluctuated in the same way as the magic power in Jiang Tian's body, rapidly rotating. Gradually, this kind of spiritual energy rotated faster and faster and spread out of the shop. When the falling snowflakes fell from the sky and landed on the roof of the shop, they also rotated, forming spinning snowflakes that quickly slid in all directions. The snow became heavier and heavier. It was silent. After a long time, Jiang Tian gradually came to his senses. He stood up and opened the door of the shop. A gust of cold wind blew in his face, mixed with countless cold snowflakes. Jiang Tian looked up at the sky and said calmly, "The soul formation stage, I'm determined to get. No one can use me as a chess piece." The snowflakes falling from the sky became heavier. A thick layer of snow accumulated on the ground. At this moment, the door of the ironworks shop opposite suddenly opened. Ahu and his father were about to go out when they saw Jiang Tian standing opposite them. They could not help but be stunned. Then, Ahu ran a few steps and stepped on the snow, making crunching sounds. He came to Jiang Tian's side and shouted, "Uncle Jiang, did you know that we were coming?" As he spoke, he entered the room and sat by the fire. Ahu's father, Tainyo, held a wooden basket with a silly smile and said to Jiang Tian, "Brother Jiang, Are you busy? Jiang Tian smiled and said, No, come in and talk. The father and son entered the room and opened the lid of the wooden basket. There were 4 home-cooked dishes and 2 pots of fruit wine in it. Jiang Tian glanced at it and looked at Ahu's father with a faint smile. In the past few years, he had often been in contact with him. This was the first time that he had seen this straightforward man act like this. Obviously, he had something to do with him. Brother Tai Nyo, if you have something to say, just say it, Jiang Tian said. Ahu's father hesitated, rubbed his hands, and said awkwardly, It's okay. It's okay. Ahu looked at the dishes in the wooden basket. He swallowed his saliva and reached inside. His father glared at him, and Ahu was so scared that he quickly withdrew his hand and muttered discontentedly, I just want to borrow some crystal stones. What's there to be embarrassed about? Ahu's father suddenly blushed and scolded, Little bastard, I'll teach you a lesson when we get home. Ahu stuck out his tongue and said to Jiang Tian, Uncle Jiang, my father is embarrassed. Let me tell you. My mother asked the matchmaker to arrange a marriage for me, but they asked for a lot of betrothal gifts. We don't have enough money at home. Ahu's father sighed, looked at Jiang Tian, and said helplessly, Good brother, I'm really sorry to trouble you, but Ahu has no talent for cultivation. Mortals at his age are all married. The longer we wait, the harder it is to find a wife. Jiang Tian nodded with a smile, picked up the wine pot in the wooden basket, took a sip and said, How much do they want? Ahu's father hesitated and said, In fact, they don't want much. Besides, I still have some debts outside that haven't been paid back. They want 30 low-grade crystal stones. Ahu curled his lips and whispered, Mother clearly said that they need 80. You can't get back those bad debts? Before he finished speaking, he was glared at by his father again. Jiang Tian didn't say anything. He nodded and got up to go to the back room, where there was a large frame full of crystal stones and spirit stones. Jiang Tian casually picked up a piece of top-grade crystal stone, returned to the shop, and put it in front of Ahu's father. When Ahu's father saw the top-grade crystal stone, he was stunned and hurriedly said, I don't need so much. Brother, take it back. I only need to borrow 30 low-grade crystal stones. In his opinion, the top-grade crystal stone was quite big. It was much more than what he needed. Jiang Tian picked up the wine pot and said with a smile, Brother, this money is not for you. It's for me to buy wine. From now on, I'll buy a pot of wine every day. Your fruit wine is good. It's worth 10 years' worth of wine money. Ahu's father was stunned for a moment. Then he showed a grateful look and said, Brother, this. Ahu rolled his eyes and said, Dad, just take it. Uncle Jiang is different from you. He's a craftsman. Any herbal medicine is worth more than 10 low-grade crystal stones. Ahu's father glared at him again. Then, he took a deep breath, picked up the wine pot, poured himself a large cup, took a big gulp, and nodded. Brother Jiang, you don't need to worry about 10 years or 8 years. As long as you live here for one day, my family will send you a pot every day. Jiang Tian chuckled. Looking at the father and son in front of him, his heart gradually felt warm and was no longer cold. That night, Ahu's father drank a lot. 2 pots of wine were obviously not enough. Ahu served him on the side. He didn't drink enough until he brought the 10th pot. In the end, Ahu's father was drunk and passed out. But he had been holding the top-grade crystal tightly in his hand. He was helped back by Jiang Tian and Ahu. When Jiang Tian went back, Ahu whispered to Jiang Tian, Uncle Jiang, my family has a lot of this wine. My father doesn't allow me to tell others. In fact, there are several large pots in the cellar of my family, which were left by our ancestors. I heard that there are still many pots buried underground. But my father said that you like them, so he kept them for you. If my father didn't insist on selling them, my mother wouldn't let him borrow money. She could sell them at the winery for a lot of money. Chapter 2024. The night was dark, and the sound of firecrackers could be heard from afar. Braving the wind and snow, Jiang Tian returned to the medicine shop. He sat beside the stove, and his heart was filled with emotions. Dozens of low-grade crystals were a huge sum of money for mortals. But for cultivators, it was like dirt. They wouldn't even look at it. He picked up a cup of fruit wine and took a sip. A smile appeared on his face. Mortals were weak, but sometimes, the spirit that shone on them was even more precious. Just like Tainyo and his wife, they worked hard their whole life for Ahu to grow up. In order to find a wife for their child to carry on the family line, they were humble and even slightly scheming to borrow money. But this was precisely what made them valuable. No matter what, their bloodline continued. Ahu didn't have the talent for cultivation, but perhaps there would be geniuses among Ahu's descendants, allowing the bloodline to flourish for a long time. Time passed quickly, and another 3 years passed. Ahu married a girl from the grain and oil shop, the Wang family, and had a big fat boy. Ahu's mother became a grandmother as she wished. She held her eldest grandson and teased him all day long. Her hearty and happy laughter spread throughout the alley. Ahu grew a beard and opened a blacksmith shop. Unlike his father, who risked his life by hunting, Tainyo didn't go out of the city to hunt in the mountains. Instead, he helped his son. When it was good, he could get some orders from the Luoying sect. He earned more than his father when he hunted. However, because of this, their family had less free time. They were busy all day long. Only after the shop was closed did Ahu have time to drag his tired body to Jiang Tian's place with a pot of fruit wine. He watched him treat patients and get medicine. Ahu's body, perhaps because of these years of blacksmithing, became stronger and stronger. His muscles seemed to be cast from copper and iron. Even in the winter, the young man in his 20s only wore thin clothes and didn't feel cold at all. But the wrinkles on his parents' faces gradually increased. Jiang Tian's appearance also changed in the past 10 years. He no longer looked like a young man, but a middle-aged man. A few more wrinkles gradually appeared on his face, and his temples were gray. After all, if a person's appearance did not change in the slightest after 10 years, it would be an inconceivable thing for the kind and simple neighbors around him. In the next 3 years, Huang Linger came to Jiang Tian more often. Almost every month, he would come here. However, she was much more meticulous than before. Her cultivation had already stepped into the middle stage of the nascent soul stage, and she had become the hall master of the outer sect alchemy hall of the Luoying sect. It was reasonable for him to come to Jiang Tian's place to buy medicinal herbs. Furthermore, she would also give Jiang Tian some pointers on the art of alchemy, allowing Jiang Tian's alchemy and medical skills to be extremely high. Even if the mighty figures above the 9 heavens were to look at Huang Linger, they wouldn't be able to detect any abnormalities. In the late autumn of this year, the willow trees on both sides of the street were blown by the wind, and their withered yellow leaves slowly fell off amidst the rustling sounds. They were blown far away by the wind, and became rootless leaves. Fallen leaves could be seen everywhere on the street. Jiang Tian walked out of the shop. He was wearing thick clothes, and a leather hat was pressed low on his head. His waist was slightly bent, and his hands were in his sleeves. He carried a wine pot in his arms, and his body exuded a faint smell of wine and bitter medicine, giving off a sense of cowardice and decadence. At this moment, if a citizen of the Eastern Empire or an old friend saw Jiang Tian, they would definitely not be able to recognize him. He was the all-powerful imperial advisor Siqing, who had killed countless people and whose hands were stained with blood. Even some of the cultivators who had fought with him would definitely not be able to recognize him. At this moment, he looked no different from a mortal. This was not a similarity in appearance, but a similarity in spirit. Even his bones and thoughts were no different. After 10 years of turning into a mortal, Jiang Tian had completely become immortal. Now, his temples were gray, his facial features were ordinary, and his face was slightly old. Moreover, he had the carefree feeling of a mortal middle-aged man who had given up on fighting. He was no different from a middle-aged mortal who had been busy all his life and had run into obstacles everywhere. In the end, he was satisfied with the status quo. However, there was one thing that was slightly different from a mortal. That was his eyes, black and white, without any impurities. There was a faint glimmer of light, which made him look extraordinary. In the last 3 years, Jiang Tian had not meditated or cultivated once. Outside the shop, a gust of wind blew against his face, bringing with it the chill of autumn. Jiang Tian tightened his collar, closed the shop door, and then slowly walked into the distance. At this moment, a rather sturdy young man walked out of the ironworks shop opposite. He carried a bucket of waste charcoal in his hand. After leaving the shop, he immediately saw Jiang Tian, so he grinned and said, "Uncle Jiang, going to listen to books again?" Jiang Tian turned around, took out a wine pot from his arms, waved it, and said with a smile, "Ahoo, I'm almost done drinking." The young man responded, poured the charcoal in his hand to the side, and hurried into the shop. Not long after, he ran back with a wine pot and filled Jiang Tian's glass with fruit wine. With concern in his eyes, he said, "Uncle Jiang, you're old. You should drink less of this wine to warm your body." "Uncle, I know." Jiang Tian nodded with a smile. He took the wine pot, patted Ahu's shoulder, and turned to leave slowly. Looking at Jiang Tian's back, Ahu felt bitter in his heart. In the past 10 years, the omnipotent Uncle Jiang in his eyes had aged a lot. Until now, he still remembered Uncle Jiang from 10 years ago. His face was full of heroic spirit and his eyes were as bright as stars. He always remembered that Uncle Jiang once said that when he made a lot of money, he would go back and marry a wife who would wait for him. However, 10 years had passed in the blink of an eye, and he still hadn't seen Jiang Tian's wife. Regarding this, he didn't ask any more questions. Perhaps the aunt he had never met was the daughter of a rich family. It should be known that Uncle Jiang had made a lot of money and bought the Dishi tea house, but it was still not enough. As for her, she was already married to someone else. In the past few years, his daughter and the servant called Dahe didn't come back to accompany him. Uncle Jiang must be very sad, so he drinks so much wine every day. Ahu sighed and turned to go back into the shop. His father was also a little old, and now he was doing the main work of the shop. Even after the shop was closed, there were still many things to do. The habit of visiting Jiang Tian for treatment and medicine, which he developed when he was a teenager, could no longer be continued. It was just that every few days, he would take some time out to accompany this lonely Uncle Jiang. Endless falling trees rustled, and the wind was cold. Jiang Tian walked slowly with his hands in his sleeves. Occasionally he met acquaintances and he would stop and chat with them. After a while, Jiang Tian finally arrived at the Dishi tea house at the corner of the street. Chapter 2025. As soon as he entered, a rather clever young man with a towel on his shoulder immediately said with a smile, "Oh, Mr. Jiang is here. Please come in." Jiang Tian entered a private room, took off his leather hat, and said with a smile, "I don't have any money to reward you. It's useless no matter how enthusiastic you are." The waiter smiled and said, "Look at what you're saying. The shopkeeper has ordered that the first seat by the window on the east side will always be reserved for you." As he spoke, he walked quickly to the seat by the window on the east side. He swept the towel in his hand and bent down to step back. Jiang Tian sat on the bench. Not long after, the waiter served a few dishes and a small charcoal pot with boiling water. Jiang Tian put the flagon in his hand in the small pot and began to warm the wine. He poured a cup of wine and drank it from time to time. Jiang Tian just sat there and watched people enter the tea house one after another. Gradually, more and more people entered the tea house. After about an hour, a storyteller in a black robe with 3 strands of white beard came out from the back room. As soon as this person appeared, the tea house was immediately filled with cheers and it was quite lively. Bang! The storyteller slammed the gavel and the guests below fell silent. The peach blossoms without an owner, the tobacco leaves with night crows. A few old wells surrounded by ruins have always been mine. The storyteller said, "Today, the Vermilion Bird sect of the Black Moon Empire rebelled. With the help of his teacher, the Iron Hand Saint, the Crown Prince of Yachang slaughtered 13 dukes and abolished the feudal system. He became the Emperor of Yatang. However, the other 8 dukes were unwilling to lose their fiefs and titles, so they sent troops to suppress them. The Black Moon Empire fell into chaos, and the people were in a terrible situation. In fact, his book was half true and half false. It was like a historical novel with some deductions of historical events. It could be said that Jiang Tian's reform in the Eastern Empire had a far-reaching impact. In 10 years, the advantages of the county system were fully revealed. It completely stimulated the potential of the people. Talents came out in large numbers. The country was strong and the people were rich. The central government centralized power, and the people were still full of vitality. It entered a glorious era. Today, although the major empires through different ways, they all implemented the county system. Some of them were drinking a cup of wine to dispel their military power, some were attacking them one by one, and some were waging war. Jiang Tian listened to the storyteller with a smile while drinking fruit wine. He had been living like this for more than a year. A moment later, a slightly plump middle-aged man wearing a thick cloth jacket hurriedly walked out from the back room. He quickly walked to Jiang Tian's side and sat down. The waiter respectfully served him a pot of wine. The middle-aged fat man immediately filled the cup and drank it in one gulp. He looked at Jiang Tian and said awkwardly, "Mr. Jiang, this?" Jiang Tian picked up the wine jug and took a sip. He smiled and said, "Managerly, I'm not here to collect rent today. Don't worry." The middle-aged fatty immediately heaved a sigh of relief and said with an apologetic smile, "Business isn't good. Although I have a lot of people here now, it cost me a lot of crystals to invite this storyteller troupe. Sigh, it's not easy to do business in this world." Jiang Tian smiled and didn't say anything. Instead, he quietly listened to the storyteller. The middle-aged fatty's surname was Li, and his name was Jiang Tian. Until now, he still didn't know. 2 years ago, this man went to Jiang Tian and mortgaged this shop. He begged and begged to borrow 200 crystals, and he still hadn't paid the money back. This shop had now become Jiang Tian's. In the past year, he saw that Jiang Tian came almost every day. He felt uneasy and often came to find out what was going on. After Fatty Li left, the sound of a string instrument rang out, and another group of beautiful performers went on stage to sing. As the performers' beautiful eyes turned, the men in the tea house cheered. At this moment, a rather obscene voice came from outside the tea house. "Oh, this little girl sang well. She lured me here from the north of the city." Good. The moment the voice came, an old man in a gray cotton robe walked in. The old man's hair was messy, his face was blue and purple, and there were several big footprints on his chest and lapel. As soon as he came in, he immediately cheered loudly. The waiter frowned and scolded, "Where did this beggar come from? Go away. I have no money today." As he spoke, he stepped forward and was about to push him away. The old man stared and said, "You touch me. If you dare to touch me, I won't get up. I'm here today to listen to the opera." The moment Jiang Tian saw the old man, his eyes suddenly flashed with a light that hadn't been seen for many years. This old man's strength was not bad. He was actually at the sage realm. The manager of the tea house sitting opposite Jiang Tian, the middle-aged fatty, immediately frowned, stood up, and walked quickly to the door. He rummaged in his pocket for a long time, and finally took out a piece of coarse crystal, which was not even a low-grade crystal. After throwing it to the old man, he said, "I've given you the money. Hurry up and leave. It's really bad luck." The old man took the turbid crystal and bit it with his teeth. He grinned at the waiter and said, "Yes, it's true. Yes, it's true. Crystal stones are the hard currency. Do you see that? Your shopkeeper is quite sensible." As he spoke, he threw the crystal stone in his hand, which fell into the waiter's hand, and said proudly, "A pot of good tea." Then, his gaze swept over and landed on Jiang Tian. He walked over. Jiang Tian's heart skipped a beat, and he narrowed his eyes slightly. Could it be that this man knew that he was a cultivator? But after a while, he realized that he should be overthinking. At this time, in the whole tea house, only Jiang Tian's table was occupied. The rest were all occupied. The waiter was stunned for a moment. He looked at the turbid crystal in his hand, and then looked at the manager with a helpless face. He had seen many beggars, but this was the first time he had seen one who asked for money to buy tea. "Mr. Jiang is our distinguished guest. This seat, you can't sit there." The middle-aged fat man's face twitched. He rolled up his sleeves and was about to throw the old beggar out. But at this time, Jiang Tian raised his hand and said, "Forget it. I've given you the money. Why don't you buy something to eat?" You just want to drink tea. Forget it. Serve him tea. The middle-aged fat man immediately paused. He hesitated for a moment, muttered a few words, and turned to the back room. Little brother, you're quite sensible. The old man smiled, picked up Jiang Tian's fruit wine, poured himself a cup, and took a sip happily. TSK, good wine. The strange old man smacked his lips, looked at Jiang Tian, and suddenly exclaimed exaggeratedly, wow, wow. Wow, incredible, incredible. This old man saw a beam of spiritual light shoot out from the top of your head. You know that at such a young age, you have a body of muscles and bones. You must be a rare cultivation genius. Jiang Tian was speechless. This line, why was it so familiar? The old beggar suddenly took out a tattered book from his bosom. His face became stern as he solemnly said, "This is the first time I've seen you. As the saying goes, if I don't go to hell, who will? Are you interested in cultivating with me and practicing peerless skills? The great task of punishing evil and promoting good, and maintaining world peace is handed over to you. I'll sell you a copy of the peerless godly skill, the Buddha's palm. Only 50 pieces of low-grade crystal stones." Chapter 2026. Jiang Tian's heart was slightly moved. On the continent, there were only a few void-returning saints. Even though Jiang Tian had never met them before, he still had a thorough understanding of them. According to his behavior, it was not hard to guess that this person was the famous mad saint, Renfenglu. This person was obsessed with beauties and created the 100-Flower Atlas and the 10 Beauties painting. He loved good wine and good food and was not bound by the rules of the world. He was not like the other saints who always acted high and mighty, thus he was called the Three Addicts Saint. Ordinary sages always seem to be detached from worldly affairs, like dust, ethereal and otherworldly. However, Renfenglu liked to hang around in the marketplace, selling the 10 Beauties painting and the 100 Flowers chart in exchange for money to buy wine. He even turned into a beggar to experience the mortal world, crazy and foolish. Even though this person hung around in the marketplace and was often ostentatious, he should have leaked more information than the other saints. However, after Jiang Tian studied his information, he discovered that he was even more mysterious. He had all sorts of unfathomable and inconceivable aspects. In any case, I'm in the dark and you're in the light. I want to see what tricks you can play. Jiang Tian smiled and took out 50 low-grade crystals. It's not expensive anyway, I'll buy it and take a look. The old beggar immediately gave the Buddha's palm to Jiang Tian, then he took the crystals and left with a smile. Today's business was not bad, I made a big profit. The Dashi Tea House's dishes are too ordinary, it's best to go to the Great Pine restaurant to eat. Jiang Tian wanted to open the Buddha's palm to take a look, but suddenly, the observation treasure in his chest trembled. Jiang Tian's expression greatly changed. The treasure in the critical Grand Canyon is moving. Very quickly, Jiang Tian hurriedly left. On this day, the critical Grand Canyon suddenly emitted a bright light. The vast spirit energy was 10 times or even 100 times denser than before. Universal laws and grand Taos were even more condensed. Along with this surging spirit energy, there were the remains of battleships, fragments of saint weapons, and the remains of powerful existences that fell on the evil-infested ridge. These treasures came from different eras, including the Middle Age, the Ancient Age, and even the Primordial Age and the Desolate Age. Many of them were invaluable and extremely beneficial to cultivators. In an instant, the entire continent was shaken. The news that the Great Juncture Canyon was about to open spread across the entire Saint Origin world in the shortest time possible. Whether it was the aristocratic families, the mortal empires, or the secluded sects, they all received the news. In fact, many major forces had already calculated the date when the critical Grand Canyon would open. That was because the Grand Canyon only opened once every 100 years, and it had been 90 years since the last time it opened. Therefore, the opening this time was just a few years ahead of schedule. However, it didn't matter even if it was brought forward. For this opening, countless empires and sects had made ample preparations and were eager to give it a try. For everyone, the opening of the Grand Canyon meant a great opportunity. There were large amounts of spirit medicines and medicinal grasses, godly stones and treasure metals, and even the sloughs of almighty existences. When the Grand Canyon opened, it meant that the harvest season had arrived. Although the Great Juncture Canyon was dangerous in the eyes of many sects and aristocratic families, it was also a land of treasures. This place was rich in divine metals, spirit medicines and medicinal grasses, fierce beasts roared, and demonic beasts gathered in groups. It was simply too rich. As for the origin of the Grand Canyon and why there were so many sloughs, no one could explain it clearly. Some said that the critical Grand Canyon was born on this piece of land. Some said that the Grand Canyon came from outer space. Some even said that the Grand Canyon was the passage between the continent and the Devil Realm, and that these magic treasures belonged to the Devil Realm. However, Jiang Tian knew that the canyon wasn't connected to the Devil Realm. The real Devil Realm was incomparably vast, even vaster than the central galaxy. Its diameter was calculated in terms of 100,000 light years, and a mountain was tens of thousands of kilometers high. If the Devil Realm was connected to the Saint Origin world, the Saint Origin world would be immediately devoured by its terrifying attraction force. Jiang Tian had entered the Great Juncture Canyon several times in his previous life and discovered the reason for the eruption of Devil Chi. It was just a fragment of the Devil Realm that fell into the canyon. The Devil Realm fragment should have fallen in the Desolation Era, and the specific age was unknown. However, the area of the Devil Realm fragment was not small. Moreover, there was an unknown supreme demonic being, the Devil's Claws, which constantly released Devil Chi to nourish them and formed a Devil's Nest, which was a system suitable for the demonic beings to live in. There were too many demonic beings and resources were scarce. Naturally, they had the desire to expand. Therefore, from the Desolation Era to the ancient times and the Middle Ages, the Devil's Tide broke out from this place again and again, causing great turmoil and Devil's calamity. Of course, the mighty figures of the human race wouldn't sit idly by. Since the Desolation Era, there were leaders of the human race who organized armies of cultivators to suppress the demonic beings and destroy the Devil's Nest. In the final analysis, this area had become a battlefield between the human race and the demon race. Of course, there were many treasures and wreckage left behind. In the end, an unparalleled sage in the Middle Ages planted a subimmortal tree in the Devil's Nest, which suppressed the supreme demonic being, the Devil's Claws. Therefore, there was no Devil's Tide after that. Of course, the overflow of Devil Chi was inevitable. Even though the Grand Canyon was in the territory of the Eastern Empire, once it was opened, the Eastern Empire directly opened this area to the rest of the world. Because of this opening, there was a surge of spirit energy and cultivation resources. However, in the historical records, it was often accompanied by the appearance of demonic beings. Once a high-level demonic being entered the continent, the Eastern Empire would bear the brunt. Because of this, the Eastern Empire's attitude was to allow everyone to come and pick up treasures. However, once the Devil's Tide broke out, there would be people to stop it. The Eastern Empire opened its doors and allowed cultivators to enter the Devil's Nest and the Grand Canyon. In just a moment, the experienced great sects and countries all sent out their disciples to the evil-infested ridge to see if there was a great fortune to find the legendary treasures. As for the host, the Eastern Empire, they had already sent out an army of cultivators to guard the entrance of the evil-infested ridge. Outside of welcoming the disciples from the great sects and countries, they were also there to see if there were any sects or cultivators that were qualified to enter the evil-infested ridge. Even though the evil-infested ridge was said to be shared by the entire world. In fact, the sects that were qualified to enter the evil-infested ridge were all great sects and countries or famous heroes. As for the smaller sects and ordinary cultivators, they didn't have any hope of entering the evil-infested ridge. As a sacred ground, the Luo Ying sect naturally didn't want to fall behind. Not only was this the time to harvest cultivation resources, but it was also a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for the disciples to train themselves and improve their cultivation. Whether it was killing demonic beasts or avoiding the evil energy, both were rare experiences. This time, The two big shots, Lian Huahun and Saint Qianemo, were leading the team. There were also 4 spirit transformation disciples and dozens of nascent soul disciples. Of course, this wasn't enough. They still needed to bring a few servant disciples as well as some external laborers as a supplement. Cultivators were high above and didn't need to do many things themselves. They needed to take care of their daily lives. Their flying ships, chariots, and other treasures needed to be maintained, so they needed to organize their harvest. As for Jiang Tian, he quickly applied to be a laborer. He boarded the flying ship and headed towards the evil-infested ridge. In fact, before the departure of the Luo Ying sect's disciples, even half a month ago, there were already people stationed at the evil-infested ridge. The evil-infested ridge was like a dragon lying on the earth, separating the heaven and earth. The entrance to the evil-infested ridge was right in front of the cliff. This cliff spanned for 100,000 miles. Standing on top of this cliff and looking at the 8 directions made people feel that the 8 directions were small and they themselves were insignificant. Chapter 2027. The first group to enter the evil-infested ridge was the Eastern Empire's team. The Eastern Empire's vanguard, outside of being the host to welcome the disciples from the great powers, was also responsible for screening the qualifications of the sects and cultivators to enter the evil-infested ridge. This time, the Eastern Empire's vanguard was personally led by eldest Princess Mou. In addition, the Eastern Gorge County Governor, Lin Yang, was the vice commander. In the first Hidden Dragon exam after the Reformation, Lin Yang performed well and was ranked in the top 5 of the empire. At that time, he was appointed as the Demon Slayer General and took orders from eldest Princess Mou. In the war against the Pantheon of Demons in the following years, he fought valiantly at the vanguard and made remarkable contributions time and time again. His official rank was jumping every year. Right now, he was already in the level of a governor of a border. Today, the Myriad Demon Temple only existed in name. The demons either surrendered or were killed. Dongfang Jie's whereabouts were unknown. Outside of the fact that his official rank was not hereditary, his authority was even greater than his father's in the past. The original 108 territories were divided into more than 50 counties. As the governor, the area under his jurisdiction was even larger than Jinyuanhou. In order to eliminate the Myriad Demon Temple, Lin Yang fought in the evil-infested ridge for many years. Since he was the governor, he understood the situation and was fully responsible. 10 years of fighting, 10 years of tempering, Lin Yang was no longer the ignorant youth of the past. His face had become resolute while his gloomy gaze carried traces of fierceness. He wasn't as lively and frail as he was all those years ago. His cultivation also increased by leaps and bounds, entering the early spirit-severing stage. His aura was mighty and his future was limitless. When the Eastern Empire's team was stationed at the evil-infested ridge's entrance, many cultivators had already heard the news and came. Especially the vagrant cultivators and young cultivators in the vicinity, after hearing the news, they came early to watch from afar. These vagrant cultivators and young cultivators definitely didn't have the qualifications to enter the evil-infested ridge. However, they wanted to fish in troubled waters and see if they could sneak into the evil-infested ridge during the chaos. Even if they couldn't sneak into the evil-infested ridge, they could use this chance to see the grand characters of the great powers. If they had the chance to see the grand characters of the saints, then this trip wouldn't be a waste. After the Eastern Empire's troops arrived at the evil-infested ridge, these vagrant cultivators wisely left the ridge and watched from afar. They were not foolish enough to oppose a monster like the Eastern Empire. The Flying Phoenix sect's sect master is here. Not long after Lin Yang and the others arrived on the mountain, they saw a cultivator riding a flood dragon horse. There were only 3 to 5 people following this sect master. Even so, this sect master's natural laws surged, and there were great Tao fragments submitting to him. This made the expressions of many small cultivators change. The Flying Phoenix School is amazing. 3rd place in the 2nd Hidden Dragon exam. They actually received special permission from His Majesty to create a school and obtain the qualifications to enter the evil-infested ridge and explore the Grand Canyon. Many young cultivators enviously commented after seeing the Flying Phoenix School in the distance. When the sect master of the Flying Phoenix sect arrived, Lin Yang, who was in charge of welcoming the guests, only cupped his fists from afar. The sovereign Su De didn't dare to be arrogant in front of Lin Yang, so he settled down on his own. Next, a few sect masters from the Eastern Kingdom who were qualified to enter the evil-infested ridge also came. However, they didn't bring many people and didn't dare to show off. They were very respectful towards Lin Yang and Mou. This was the characteristic of the Eastern Kingdom. The sects were no longer high up, they were vassals of the imperial power. The imperial power was not naturally obtained, it was bestowed by the people. The ruler was light while the people were important. The responsibility of cultivators was to fight for the mortals. The real big head is still the Starfire Academy. The Starfire Academy is supported by the entire kingdom. That's right. Sect masters like Sudo were all recruited from other countries and sects in the continent through the Hidden Dragon exam. They were allowed to create the Flying Phoenix sect in order to maintain the diversity of cultivation methods. Originally, they were all supposed to be teachers at the Starfire Academy. Many cultivators laughed and said. Very quickly, they also arrived at the Starfire Academy. Rays of light pierced through the heaven and earth. Natural laws surged and the Grand Tao surrendered. There were dozens of spirit formation cultivators and several hundred nascent soul cultivators. Unfortunately, there were no saints. However, this momentum was not inferior to the 10 great divine schools. Their development could be said to be rapid. The leaders were Lin Hanqing and Fang Jinlong. The two of them had already given up their ancestral titles and fiefs. Moreover, they disliked the competition in the imperial court and were unwilling to become ministers. Furthermore, they missed Jiang Tian and helped him fulfill his wish. Thus, they became the principals of the Starfire Academy and nurtured talents for the Eastern Kingdom. Even though 10 years had passed, the Eastern Kingdom still missed Jiang Tian. The Starfire Academy erected a stone statue of him that was as high as the clouds. Moreover, he would always be the honorary principal. The Black Moon Empire's Emperor Yang is here. As the days passed, experts from the other great sects and countries outside the Eastern Kingdom arrived one after another. Boom, boom, boom. In the horizon, a series of rumbling sounds echoed. Suddenly, a group of armored cavalry trod on the sky. This armored cavalry trod on the void, and the divine steeds under them were like lightning. In an instant, they drew a long shadow in the void. This armored cavalry trod across the sky like a flash of light. Nay, along with a long neigh, the cavalry that was like a torrent of steel instantly stopped above the cliff. The entire cavalry was close to 1,000 people, but they stopped in an extremely orderly formation, and their movements were like moving clouds and flowing water. This armored cavalry troop was all equipped with divine steeds and armor. It was as if they were a triumphant iron brigade that had just returned from the battlefield. Every disciple of the armored cavalry troop was cold and murderous. Such an entire troop was cold and merciless. Their murderous intent soared to the sky, making it hard for people to breathe. Seeing such an armored cavalry troop, everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. To be able to cultivate such an armored cavalry troop, one could only imagine how shocking their origin was. What kind of powerful sect and country was this? It's the Yachang Emperor and our teacher, the Iron Hand Saint. After the Yachang Emperor arrived, Mou and Lin Yang personally welcomed him. The Yachang Emperor was the crown prince of Yang. After 10 years of bitter cultivation and countless opportunities, he had already reached the cultivation of a half-saint. What was even more terrifying was that behind him stood an old man dressed in hemp clothes. The old man was tall and burly. The laws around him were as vast as the sea, and the great Tao was as heavy as a mountain. The pressure of a void-returned saint was released mightily, causing everyone to tremble in fear. Iron Hand Saint. Mou hurriedly bowed respectfully. The strength of the Iron Hand Saint was much stronger than that of Suj. Moreover, he could be said to be one of the strongest saints in the secular world. Greetings, Iron Hand Saint, Yacheng Emperor. Lin Yang also bowed his head, concealing the hatred that flashed in his eyes, but a chill appeared in his heart. 10 years ago, if it weren't for Yacheng's instigation, although his sister Lin Dai was stupid, she wouldn't have rashly provoked Jiang Tian and ended up being killed with a palm strike. There were dozens of disciples of the Iron Hand Saint, and all of them were extraordinary. With one look, one could tell that most of these disciples had stepped into the divine transformation realm. As a disciple of the younger generation, to be able to step into the divine transformation realm was already very impressive. Especially in recent years, the Black Moon Empire had been reforming the system of counties and counties. Feudal lords were rising, and the flames of war were spreading. The essence of heaven and earth was exhausted, and cultivation was very difficult. The Tianluo sect is here too. Yan Nanxian is leading the group. I heard that Yan Nanxian was extremely lucky. A dozen years ago, he was only at the mid-divine transformation realm, but now he has reached the half-step void return realm and is known as a half-saint. As the deputy sect leader, he has a chance to become a true saint in the future. Someone said emotionally. When the Tianluo sect arrived, they were also extremely arrogant. The man in the lead wore a simple and natural long robe. His beard was as dense as steel needles, and his expression was solemn. There was also a long sword on his back. If there were knowledgeable people, they would be able to tell that the scabbard was made from the thinnest piece of dragon skin on the back of the silver-bearded golden-eye dragon. Although this kind of dragon was only a nascent soul realm demon beast, it was extremely rare and lived in the forbidden area of the universe. If Jiang Tian was here, he would probably be greatly shocked as well. This was because at this time in his previous life, Yan Nanxian was only at the mid-divine transformation realm, but now he was at the half-step void return realm. This was probably due to Jiang Tian's return, which more or less caused a butterfly effect and changed the course of history. For example, the pantheon of demons was destroyed earlier, the eruption of the canyon earlier, and Yan Nanxian's advancement earlier. The man and woman behind him were his son Yan Beifei and his disciple Zhao Feifei. The man wore a white robe that shone brightly. He was tall and straight like an unsheathed sword. He had reached the early divine transformation realm and was also a sacred grade god. As for the woman, she was dressed in crimson clothes. Her waist was slender like a snake, and her 2 long legs were wrapped in a short skirt. Her entire body was like a burning flame, but her pretty face was delicate and pretty. Her black hair hung down like ink, and she lowered her head slightly. Her 2 big eyes blinked just like the girl next door. However, her cultivation level was not to be underestimated. She was also at the early divine transformation realm. Why haven't I seen any ancient saints come? As the mighty figures of the divine sects, holy grounds, and aristocratic families arrived one after another, some inexperienced cultivators did not know the reason and asked curiously. The so-called ancient sages were still return to void stage saints, but they had already reached the return to void final stage. Ancient saints basically did not show themselves. They were all in a state of concealment, so they were even more mysterious. Some people even said that the ancient saints were just illusory legends and that they had all died out long ago. You don't know. Legend has it that the critical canyon is very strange. Even saints at the mid and late divine transformation realm can't pass through the barrier. An old cultivator said, "Ancient saints won't appear easily now." An even older cultivator shook his head gently and said, "In the past 30,000 years, no new late divine transformation realm ancient saints have appeared on the continent. The original lifespan of the ancient saints was more than 30,000 years, and the lifespan of a return void cultivator is 30,000 years. Therefore, they are either at the end of their lifespan or have stopped their blood flow and are unwilling to come out." That's right. Although the critical canyon is a great opportunity, it's not enough for a return void cultivator to reach the Dao integration realm. If they come out, it'll be a waste of their essence. It's not worth it. Some people expressed their agreement. With the arrival of the disciples from the great sects, The evil-infested ridge became a sea of people and many cultivators set up camp. Some sects had treasure pavilions that were floating in the air, and their disciples directly lived in the pavilions. Some sects came with a huge ancient ship, which was both their flying treasure and their temporary residence. There were also cultivators who gathered in groups of 3 to 5, chatting loudly and rubbing their palms together, waiting for the right moment to strike. However, the number of cultivators that came to the evil-infested ridge was not limited to just these. In the sky, there were disciples from the great sects that came from time to time. Some rode on swords, some rode on rocks, and some rode on huge flying mountains. There were all kinds of colors and strange things. It could even be said that those below the nascent soul realm and vagrant cultivators that didn't have the backing of a great sect didn't dare to enter. After all, there were too many powerful forces here. Outside of the ancient saints that didn't take action, it could be said that the experts of the entire continent had gathered here with an unprecedented lineup. Even though there was a certain amount of order, if you offended an expert and they wanted to kill you, no one would risk their life for a little cultivator like you. That would be an unforeseen disaster. In this chaotic atmosphere, Jiang Tian arrived with the identity of a servant with the Luo Ying sect. He saw Yan Nanxian at first glance. Chapter 2028. Yan Nanxian, Zhao Feifei, Yan Beifei. How we finally meet. The timing couldn't be better. Instantly, new and old grudges surged in his heart. In his previous life, Yan Nanxian had once taken in Jiang Tian. Jiang Tian had become a disciple of the Tian Luo sect. Yan Nanxian seemed to think highly of Jiang Tian and approved of him. He poured cultivation resources into Jiang Tian as if they were free. He taught him everything he knew and told him everything he knew. In fact, when Zhao Feifei had feelings for Jiang Tian, his son, Yan Beifei, had a conflict with Jiang Tian out of jealousy and hatred. Yan Nanxian still stood on Jiang Tian's side to uphold justice. He was furious and scolded his son, punishing Yan Beifei to reflect on his mistakes for 3 years. Because of all these reasons, Jiang Tian in his previous life was extremely grateful to Yan Nanxian. He saw him as a father and brother. Not only was he grateful, he also trusted him. However, very quickly, Jiang Tian also faced the cruelest blow since he stepped into the cultivation world. It was the saddest and most tragic disillusionment. When Jiang Tian was about to break through, Yan Nanxian lowered his status and took the initiative to protect him. However, he was actually after Jiang Tian's body and wanted to occupy it. Previously, he gave many benefits because he wanted to push Jiang Tian's cultivation level up as soon as possible so that he could possess him. His grace to Jiang Tian was also to dispel his wariness. If Jiang Tian had not received the blessing of Zhao Xueqing's providence in his previous life, he would have died on the spot. Although Jiang Tian was not afraid of death and had great providence to escape, Yan Nanxian still sent out countless disciples to hunt Jiang Tian down. They turned the entire Saint Origin world upside down for more than 10 years. During those years, Jiang Tian was like a lone wolf. No, it should be said that he was like a stray dog or a rat crossing the street. He hid from place to place and lived a precarious and dark life. What made Jiang Tian even more miserable was that he was unable to track down Jiang Tian. Yan Nanxian had targeted Jiang Tian's relatives and friends. All of Jiang Tian's friends in Saint Origin world were killed by him, including Lin Yang's family. There was only one reason, and that was that they knew Jiang Tian. Yan Nanxian's actions were not just to vent his anger, but also to force Jiang Tian to come out. He firmly believed that Jiang Tian was a kind-hearted person who valued friendship and righteousness. He would not drag out an ignoble existence and watch as his friends and family were killed. However, he had underestimated Jiang Tian's desire to live. Jiang Tian knew that he would die if he went out, so he chose to protect himself. Although it was shameful, he still managed to keep his life. Countless nights, Jiang Tian recalled how Yan Nanxian had fooled and deceived him. Crazy hatred gnawed at his soul like a poisonous snake, burning his anger. More than that, there was guilt and self-doubt. Many times, he felt that he was worse than a beast. In order to save his own life, he silently watched his friends and family being killed. The torture of his soul and the interrogation of his soul made him unable to calm down. There were several times when he almost went crazy. Coincidentally, it was as if there was the hand of a supreme god that was invisibly fiddling with everyone's fate. Jiang Tian met Yan Nanxian when he was preparing to go to Saint Origin World in the carriage of Juma Star. At that time, Yan Nanxian had just reached Divine Transformation Realm and Jiang Tian had the strength to kill him. However, even though Jiang Tian's hatred was monstrous, he still did not take action. The reason was that Jiang Tian was waiting for the opening of the Devil's Back territory today, waiting for the appearance of the Devil's Claws and the quasi-immortal tree so that he could obtain the opportunity to reach Divine Transformation Realm. Before that, he could not complicate matters. After all, Jiang Tian was an old demon that had cultivated for 10,000 years and lived 2 lives. His mentality was extremely calm and rational. Compared to improving his cultivation and ascending to immortality and becoming a god, grudges were just a small matter. It was not good to lose the big picture for the small. However, now that the Devil's Claws were spewing out devil chi, the quasi-immortal tree was almost decaying. Jiang Tian was about to obtain the opportunity and end his journey in Saint Origin World. Yan Nanxian and the others had come to deliver their heads. How could he not kill Jiang Tian? Jiang Tian's emotions were in turmoil, but his face was extremely calm and gloomy. His sharp eyes flashed, and after retracting them, they became dull. His waist was bent, and there was no trace of murderous intent or aura fluctuation. Yan Nanxian is already a half-saint of void return. This is much higher than his cultivation in his previous life. In fact, many people's cultivation progress is much higher than it was in their previous life. Their progress is accelerating. The reason is very simple. I implemented a new policy in the Eastern Empire, but I didn't expect that a single spark could start a prairie fire. Now, many secular countries in Saint Origin World are affected by the new policy. Most of the secular empires, through peace or war, have implemented the county system and abolished the enfeoffment system. The potential of the people has been stimulated to the extreme. Talented people have been born in large numbers, and giants have been born. They have become an existence that can compete with the hidden sects. The power of the secular empires has also made the hidden sects feel challenged. Just like in the Eastern Empire, the sects have become vassals of the imperial power. It's just that the Imperial Academy is flexible. Therefore, the secluded sects are also rapidly improving their strength under the pressure. Specifically, every cultivator can obtain more cultivation resources, cultivation techniques, and so on from the sections. The speed of advancement is several times faster than before. The secular empires and the hidden sects are like the United States and Soviet Union fighting for hegemony on Earth. They have launched an arms race, and the potential of both sides has been stimulated. Jiang Tian thought in his heart, but on the surface he was like an ordinary person, listless, cowering, and dispirited, as if he was about to die. His gaze fell on Emperor Yachang, who was talking and laughing with Princess Mou. Looking at Princess Mou's frown, he could guess what Emperor Yachang was talking about. Probably he's pursuing Princess Mou and wants to marry her? Although Mou has a fiery temper, she's not a fool. She won't fall for it. Jiang Tian's eyes revealed traces of ridicule. Jiang Tian naturally knew that the reason why Lin Dai jumped out to oppose him at the Imperial Advisor's Mansion's housewarming banquet 10 years ago was because of Yachang's instigation. Wu Yachang was not a mediocre person. At that time, he saw the huge potential of Jiang Tian's reform. The county system would make the Eastern Empire look brand new, from poverty and weakness to a peerless power. Furthermore, the Black Moon Empire was adjacent to the Eastern Empire. As the saying went, how could one allow others to sleep beside one's bed? Of course, the Eastern Empire's strength was what Yachang was most unwilling to see. Therefore he sabotaged it. It wasn't convenient for you to settle those debts previously. But now I can settle them all together. A trace of killing intent emerged in Jiang Tian's heart again. Back then, Jiang Tian wanted to kill Yang Dingtian and protect Huanglinger. He needed a world-shaking battle to cover up the clues. Ye Chang's instigation and Lin Dai's questioning and provocation were exactly what Jiang Tian wanted. But Jiang Tian wouldn't be so forgiving when Ye Chang harbored ill intentions back then. Naturally, he wanted to eliminate him. When the critical realm opens, the devil chi will be exposed, and the immortal chi will be suppressed. The great sects and powerful countries will rush in to search for opportunities. The battlefield will change rapidly. It's too easy to take advantage of this opportunity to eliminate a half-saint. Even if you bring along your master, you still won't be able to stop it. Jiang Tian glanced at the Iron Hand Saint beside him, who was dressed in hemp clothes and had a simple and crude face, and a trace of contempt flashed in his eyes. The Iron Hand Saint was indeed a genuine Void Return Saint and wasn't weak at all. His cultivation and strength was much more terrifying than the sect patriarch of the Cold Moonsword sect, Su Zhe, who besieged Jiang Tian during the housewarming banquet. The reason why Jiang Tian was so fearless was because in his previous life, Jiang Tian had ventured deep into the critical realm canyon more than once. Furthermore, he had flipped through a large number of ancient books and records regarding this place. It could be said that this place was extremely mysterious and dangerous to ordinary people. But to him, it was transparent and had no secrets to speak of. Jiang Tian had the geographical advantage and could make use of various opportunities to eliminate the Iron Hand Saint. Chapter 2029. The Luoying sect was led by Lian Huahun and Saint Qianma, not the sect master. However, the Luoying sect was still a holy land. Moreover, Lian Huahun was the saintess and Saint Qianma was also a giant. Therefore, when he arrived, he attracted a lot of attention. Immediately, someone came over to greet them. After all, the opening of the critical realm was extremely dangerous. At this time, they needed to work together to overcome the difficulties. Of course, they had to build a good relationship in advance. The guardian of the Eastern Empire greets the seniors of the Luoying sect. The first to arrive was Mou, who brought Lin Yang, Fang Gouyu, Fang Jinlong, and Lin Hanqing. Their posture was very humble as they bowed like disciples. It was not for Lian Huahun, but for Saint Qianma. She had followed the great ancestor Emperor Dongfang Run to conquer the world and establish the empire. Her seniority was very high and her status was incomparably respected. Honored guests, your arrival brings light to my humble dwelling. On the Luoying sect's side, Lian Huahun and Saint Qianma would personally meet them. Under the greeting of Huang Linger and a few other disciples, the empire's representatives boarded the Luoying sect's flying ship and sat down in a spacious and bright hall. As a servant, Jiang Tian, after serving tea, he stood at the door with his back hunched and was on duty. In the seat, Lin Yang sipped his tea and subconsciously glanced at Jiang Tian. Suddenly, his pupils constricted and emitted a strange light. "Husband, what's wrong?" Beside him, Fang Gouyu asked softly. 10 years of wind and rain, 10 years of hardships. Fang Gouyu had personally witnessed Lin Yang's transformation from a playboy to a mature and steady general of the empire. Especially after experiencing several years of cruel war against the pantheon of demons, Lin Yang had killed countless enemies and had long developed a heart as hard as iron. He was usually cold and calm, and his expression would not change even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of him. "It's nothing." Lin Yang shook his head gently and glanced at Jiang Tian again. Only then did he withdraw his gaze, and his eyes dimmed. "The feeling he gives me is very similar to Mr. Jiang." He did not know why, but when he saw the old man serving tea, he actually had a sense of familiarity. However, he quickly expelled this strange thought from his mind. After all, back then, Imperial Preceptor Siqing was a terrifying existence who dared to make enemies of all the sects in the world. She was all-powerful and had killed people like flies. However, the old man in front of him had no cultivation at all. Of course, Lin Yang also knew that Jiang Tian often used mysterious methods to hide his true cultivation and had a backup plan. However, this old man's temples were white, and he was shivering and dispirited. Even his gaze was dim and without any sharpness. He was completely an ordinary person who had achieved nothing, ran into walls everywhere, lost hope in fame and status, and gave up on struggling. He only wished to live out his remaining days in peace and stability. One's cultivation could be concealed, and one's posture and actions could be faked. However, a person's charm could not be changed. Sigh, I wonder where Mr. Jiang went. It's probably because I miss him too much that I have this illusion. Lin Yang's mind was in a mess. Suddenly, the laws fluctuated slightly, and would attribute spiritual energy filled the air. A woman in palace attire and a woman in green walked in. Saint Qianma and Saintess Lian Huahan have arrived. Greetings, senior. Lin Yang and the others quickly got up and saluted. Everyone, please have a seat. Saint Qianma smiled kindly and waved her hand slightly. Thank you, senior. Everyone sat down. Saint Qianma glanced at everyone and a gratified look appeared in her eyes. She smiled and said, Little Mou, you've broken through to the half-saint realm. Congratulations. I once heard that you've been stuck at the 6th level of the soul formation realm for decades and couldn't advance an inch. In the past 10 years, you've improved by leaps and bounds. In 10 years, you've walked the path of the previous 100 years. If you can break through, the Eastern Empire will have another young and powerful saint to oversee it. Thank you for your encouragement, senior. Eldest Princess Mou bowed deeply, then sighed and said, Actually, I have to thank Imperial Preceptor Siqing. Saint Qianma's gentle face was filled with curiosity. Back then, Imperial Preceptor Siqing saw that I was concerned about the affairs of the country and was eager for quick success and instant benefits. Therefore, she taught me a set of 12 divine sounds of Longhuan. Eldest Princess Mou's clear eyes revealed a look of longing as she said gently, This song is like a heavenly immortal sound. Whether it's played or listening, it can calm me down, eliminate the evil, cleanse the cover, and see the true me. Therefore, one by one, the barriers were broken through without any attack. That's right, breaking through was as easy as blowing off dust. As soon as she finished speaking, the entire place was silent. The soul formation realm cultivators of the Luoying sect were shocked. Even Lian Huahuan's beautiful eyes were wide open. Saint Qianma murmured in a low voice, When the conditions are right, it's as easy as blowing off dust. This Imperial Preceptor Siqing is really a great talent. However, when she mentioned Imperial Preceptor Siqing, it was inevitable that people would think of Purple Marquis who was killed by Jiang Tian. And Purple Marquis Shenhigu was the descendant of Saint Qianma. Senior, Purple Marquis was bewitched by the demon clan and ended up like this. I deeply regret and regret. I hope you can. In his seat, Lin Hanqing stood up and bowed, full of apology and sincerity. In fact, Lin Hanqing was a kind and honest person. From the beginning to the end, he had no intention of harming others. He did not want Purple Marquis to end up like this. However, everyone had their own motives and were in different camps. The conflict had reached an irresolvable point. Director Lin, don't blame yourself. Saint Qianma waved her hand and smiled. I've long been indifferent to the life and death of my bloodline. Besides, my lifespan is so long. My descendants have already spread and I have dozens of bloodlines. It's fine to break the bloodline of Purple Marquis. At the end of the day, Purple Marquis betrayed the Empire and colluded with the demons. He only has himself to blame. Under the seat, Eldest Princess Mou, Lin Hanqing and the others were filled with admiration. Saint Qianma's breadth of mind was indeed extraordinary. At this moment, another announcement sounded from outside the door. Yan Nanxian of the Heavenly Luo sect and his son, Yan Beifei, request an audience. Since there are new guests, we will take our leave for now. Mou and Lin Hanqing stood up tactfully. Don't be in a hurry. Saint Qianma smiled and urged them to stay. I'm very happy to see that there are so many talents in the Empire. Just accompany this old woman and chat for a while. I also want to know more about Starfire Academy's new policies and the situation of Starfire Academy. These are all treasures left behind by Imperial Tutor Siqing. Then I'll have to trouble you. Everyone had no choice but to sit down. Qianma Saint looked at Lian Huahun and said, "Sect girl, you will be in charge of receiving the Tian Luo sect." "Martial uncle, it's fine." Lian Huahun smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist Yen Nanxian, other than paying a formal visit, should have come to find a dual cultivation Tao companion for his son." Saint Qianma was slightly taken aback and said in surprise, "I heard that Yen Bei Fei and Zhao Feifei are married." "Indeed. However, Yen Bei Fei wants to find another concubine to aid his cultivation," Lian Huahun said. "Our sect's female cultivators mainly cultivate wood-type cultivation techniques that nourish tens of thousands of nomological laws. They have always been the most sought after, so," Saint Qianma frowned when she heard that. "Then, it has to be consensual." Previously, when Yang Dingtian wanted to marry Huang Linger, I heard that Huang Linger wasn't willing. Chapter 2030. Sigh, Senior, we're all experienced people. Don't you understand? Little girls are always restrained by their emotions and are not rational enough. Hearing that, Lian Huahun explained, "However, when she grows up, she will understand that in this world, what can compare to increasing her cultivation level and climbing the long path of immortality? The Tao companions I found for her are all geniuses and elites. I'm doing this for her own good." Lian Huahun was a sect disciple and had a noble status. However, Saint Qianma and her great-grandfather were of the same generation. Therefore, Lian Huahun maintained respect for her. Saint Qianma shook her head and said, "That depends on her own wishes. Our motto is that all living beings are equal, love with impartiality and non-aggression. Do you have to force your own disciple? Using power to oppress others is essentially using force to coerce them. Besides, everyone has different pursuits. She might think that being happy is more important than becoming an immortal and attaining the Tao. It might even be so for the rest of her life. If you force her like this, won't you make her suffer for the rest of her life?" Jiang Tian, who was outside the door, heard that and praised in his heart. Regardless of whether he agreed with Saint Qianma's overly idealistic and naive theory. However, Jiang Tian admired this woman's knowledge and action. She never pretended. "I've learned my lesson." Lian Huahun nodded with a smile. Saint Qianma did not know if she had really listened. However, it was not good for her to be long-winded and force him. She nodded and said, "Then go and greet the fellow Taoists of the Tian Luo sect. I'll have a chat with my old friends from the Eastern Empire." Soon, Lian Huahun led Huang Linger and the other disciples to meet Yen Nanxian and the others in another hall. Jiang Tian and the other servants served tea as usual and stood outside the hall to wait for orders. "I heard that Yen Beifei has taken a fancy to Huang Linger this time. I wonder what the sect disciple thinks." "What else can I think? Of course I agree. Huang Linger was originally brought here by her from a desolate star realm. She came from a humble background. It's her honor to be Yen Beifei's concubine." "That's true. Yen Nanxian is already an elder of the Tian Luo sect. He has a chance of ascending to the position of sect master in the future. Huang Linger has the Yi-wood spirit root and a 9th-grade physique. It's neither too good nor too bad and is most suitable for dual cultivation." Outside the door, a few outer court disciples who were in charge of managing the odd jobs were gathered together and whispering to each other. Not only did Yen Beifei get married early, he even took a fancy to Huang Linger. Fate is truly unpredictable. Jiang Tian's heart skipped a beat. Just a flap of a butterfly's wings could cause a hurricane on the other side of the ocean. His and Huang Linger's involvement in this world was only a small variable, but due to various chain reactions and magnification effects, it had greatly changed the fate of many people and even the course of the continent's history. "But why has she never mentioned it to me?" Jiang Tian was puzzled. But after thinking about it for a moment, he quickly figured it out. Huang Linger had a meticulous and quiet personality. She knew that he was deliberately hiding his identity, so she was worried that if she told him, he would casually make a move and expose his strength. At this moment, in the main hall, Lian Huahun and Yen Nanxian had already started talking. Yen Nanxian first flattered Luo Ying's sect and Lien Huahan. Finally, they talked about the purpose of their visit. They wanted to find a dual cultivation concubine for Yen Beifei and had to give a generous betrothal gift. As a sect disciple, Lien Huahan considered the long-term development of the sect. The more friends she had, the better. She had long been accustomed to this kind of marriage alliance, so she did it very smoothly. After calculating in her heart, she felt that it was extremely worth it. Thus, she smiled and nodded. Yen Beifei, may I know which disciple of my sect you have taken a fancy to? Behind her stood more than 10 female disciples. All of their cultivations were above the nascent soul realm, and there were even some at the soul transformation realm. Among the crowd, she was different from the other female cultivators with a smile on her face. Huang Linger lowered her head slightly, her hair falling down to hide her appearance. She understood that on the surface, everyone was following their master to meet the guests. However, they were actually chosen by Yen Beifei. It was like choosing livestock. One had to look at the size of their teeth. However, her expression was even more beautiful in Yen Beifei's eyes, causing his heart to skip a beat. You must be fellow Taoist Huang Linger, right? I've heard a lot about you. I've also seen you in the 10 Beauties painting and the 100 Flowers painting. Yen Beifei smiled. I didn't expect that an elite disciple of Tian Luo sect like you would also be interested in such boring works. Huang Linger raised her head and smiled with a hint of mockery. On the way here, Jiang Tian had already explained to Huang Linger how to conceal himself from the heavenly secrets. This time, after obtaining the treasures in the Great Liminal Canyon, he would bring Huang Linger out of Saint Origin World and travel to another continent far away in the Sea of Stars to find a new opportunity to become an immortal. Furthermore, there were various laws of the Devil World in the Great Liminal Canyon that concealed the probing of divine senses. It was mysterious and deep. Jiang Tian could kill people as he wished without being detected by the supreme experts. Therefore, it was not hard to imagine that anyone who coveted Huang Linger would be killed by Jiang Tian. Even if the other party was not killed by Jiang Tian, there was nothing they could do if she escaped far away. At that moment, she was no longer afraid, but she was more or less annoyed. After all, she was kind and gentle. She truly did not want to see Yen Beifei provoke her and be killed by Jiang Tian. Of course, this was also because she did not know about the feud between Jiang Tian and Yen Beifei and the others. Otherwise, she would not have cared. Yen Beifei was also slightly stunned when he sensed the mockery in Huang Linger's tone. However, he was not angry. Instead, he found this woman interesting and his desire to conquer her was provoked. He smiled in a seemingly carefree manner, showing off his knowledge of the cultivation world. It's a balance between work and rest. It's easy to fall into a state of mental exhaustion if you blindly cultivate. Only by alternating between tension and relaxation can you be close to the mortal world and comprehend everything in the world. Only then can you have a source of fresh water and not let your soul dry up. Huang Linger was expressionless and did not reply at all. However, Lien Huahan looked at Yen Beifei with admiration. Yen Beifei, have you taken a liking to Linger? I've embarrassed myself in front of you, senior. Indeed, I fell in love with Huang Linger at first sight. I hope that you can grant me my wish, senior. Yen Beifei cupped his fists. Lien Huahan replied without hesitation, no problem. She did not seek Huang Linger's opinion at all. That was because, in her opinion, everything that Huang Linger had right now was given to her by her. Naturally, she could control her own fate. Furthermore, her marriage to Yen Beifei was not only beneficial to the sect, she would not mistreat Huang Linger either. Yen Nanxian nodded slowly, looking satisfied with Huang Linger as well. This woman had an extraordinary foundation and should be able to nourish his son if they were to dual cultivate. If normal dual cultivation did not work, he would use his fiend skills to suck her dry. At the very least, he would be able to push his son up a few levels. Thank you for granting my wish, senior. Yen Beifei was overjoyed and smiled. Little sister Ling, the liminal canyon is very dangerous. However, I will protect you along the way. His gaze was also unbridledly caressing Huang Linger's curvaceous body. His posture was very frivolous and his gaze was very greedy. He looked as if he could not wait to devour Huang Linger. Huang Linger's pretty face darkened and she bowed. "Master, I'm not willing to marry. I only want to accompany you for life." The moment she said that, the entire place fell into dead silence. No one dared to believe it. They did not expect that the usually obedient and gentle Huang Linger would dare to disobey Lien Huahan. Chapter 2031. Yan Beifei's face darkened. He was clearly displeased. He thought of himself as a genius and was very handsome. Countless female cultivators were infatuated with him. Therefore, he was very narcissistic. He did not expect to be rejected. What's going on? Yan Nanxian was calm and composed, but he forced a smile. He was slightly displeased. He had also greeted Lien Huahan before. She had said that there was no problem. But now, this disciple had flatly rejected him. "Lien Huahan, how do you discipline your disciples?" Lien Huahuan's face darkened. Her gaze turned cold. She said in a low voice, "Ling, it's your fortune that Master has betrothed you to Yan Beifei. It's also for your future." She picked up the lid of the teacup and gently stirred the tea leaves in the cup. She concealed the fierce killing intent in her beautiful eyes. "What else do you want? Do you think that a wild girl from a remote star region like you can't be interested in Yan Beifei? It's important to know one's own limits." "Master's teachings are right," Huang Linger said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. "Ling was born in a remote star with a backward orthodoxy. It's inevitable that my knowledge is shallow. Moreover, my constitution, talent, and comprehension are all very poor. I've always felt inferior. I think that I'm completely unworthy of Brother Yan Beifei." Outside the door, Jiang Tian's eyes widened. He almost laughed out loud. This was the standard good guy card method of women rejecting men on Earth. He did not expect her to use it so smoothly. Yan Beifei suddenly felt speechless. Yan Nanxian also frowned. Lien Huahan also did not know how to vent her anger. She said in a low voice, "Don't belittle yourself. Master's teachings are right." Huang Linger bowed again and said seriously, "My constitution is not good. I know that my constitution is not good and my talent is limited. Therefore, I wish to invest my limited energy into unlimited cultivation. Moreover, the continent is filled with demons and evil. Demonic qi has invaded, and the people have no way of making a living. As a disciple of the divine sect, I bear the responsibility of protecting the world. I worry every day and have no heart for love." This time, Jiang Tian's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. He suddenly remembered that when he was in university in his previous life, there was a classmate who was rejected by a girl after she confessed to him. The reason was, "The motherland has yet to be unified, so how can I be in the mood to talk about love?" Now it seemed that Huang Linger was also proficient in this field. Lien Huahan was so angry that her hands were trembling. She stared at Huang Linger in disbelief. She didn't know if this girl was really stupid or just pretending to be stupid. She wanted to slap Huang Linger to death, but she couldn't really do that. After all, what the Luoying sect preached was that all living beings were equal and they loved all living beings with impartiality. They could not bully or attack each other. Since that's the case, there's no need to force it. Yan Nanxian forced a smile. After all, he was looking for a Tao companion for his son. They needed to be compatible with each other. He couldn't force it. Otherwise, it would be like a melon that was forcefully harvested would not be sweet. Dual cultivation would not work, and it would even harm Yan Beifei. Yan Beifei was still angry and said in a low voice, he said in a deep voice, "Fellow Huang Linger, you just look down on me. Why do you have to be so polite? Just say it." Huang Linger did not say a word. Her expression was calm, and Yan Beifei was helpless. "Fellow Taoists, I'm sorry. It's my fault for not disciplining her properly. That's why this girl is so impudent." Lien Huahan cupped her hands slightly and apologized to the two of them. She had made up her mind to teach Huang Linger a lesson after this. Fellow Taoist, you're too polite. This is a small matter. There's no need to worry about it. Yan Nanxian smiled and revealed a stern expression. The key is that our sects can work together in the exploration of the Great Canyon at the critical boundary. That's true. The Great Canyon at the critical boundary is incomparably dangerous. Demonic chi flows, demonic creatures wreak havoc, and the laws of the demonic world cover the sky. Not to mention us, even ancient sages can die in there. Lian Huahun deeply agreed. Immediately after, she discussed the operation strategy in the Great Canyon with Yan Nanxian. The discussion lasted for a full 15 minutes before Yan Nanxian stood up and bade farewell. Lian Huahun led everyone to send him off. Before he left, all the servants bowed with their heads lowered as a sign of respect. Jiang Tian followed suit. However, Yan Beifei was extremely displeased. He raised his hand and slapped towards Jiang Tian, hollering, "Dog of a slave, how dare you be disrespectful to me?" He wanted to kill Jiang Tian with a single slap to vent his anger. At the same time, he wanted to scare Huang Linger as an example to others. Jiang Tian's exposed cultivation was faintly discernible. In Yan Beifei's eyes, a mere servant was akin to an ant. So what if he killed him? At that moment, Huang Linger was shocked. She did not know if she would expose Jiang Tian's identity if she interfered. Lian Huahun, on the other hand, watched coldly from the sidelines. She was completely unmoved and did not care about Jiang Tian's life or death. Some of the other disciples were furious but did not dare to say anything. Some of them just watched from the sidelines. As for Yan Nanxian, he merely pretended to scold, "Child, is there a need to make things difficult for an ant?" It was as though Jiang Tian's soul was about to return to the 9 heavens and dye the ground red with his blood the next moment. However, with a bang, an invisible barrier of laws suddenly appeared beneath Yan Beifei's palm. Yan Beifei's ferocious and domineering attack of laws was like a basin of water splashed on glass, dissipating in all directions. Yan Beifei merely felt a boundless and irresistible recoil. Opening his mouth, he nearly spat out a mouthful of blood. "Yan Beifei, you're a little hot-tempered." A beautiful figure appeared in the hall not far away. Her robes fluttered in the wind and she had an otherworldly bearing. "Greetings, fellow Taoist Qianma." Yan Nanxian's expression froze as he revealed a look of deep wariness. He hurriedly bowed. "Greetings, Saint Qianma." Yan Beifei and the others bowed as well. "I know my mistake." In particular, Yan Beifei was so frightened that his legs trembled. Saint Qianma was not far from becoming an ancient sage. She was an unparalleled giant and was at the level of a sect leader. Even Yan Nanxian was far from her, let alone them. Although she did not like killing, she liked to uphold justice and help the weak. If she were to argue with him, all she had to do was say a few words to the sect leader of the Tianluo sect, and he would not be able to bear it. "Yan Beifei, it's best to know your mistake and correct it. It's not enough to know your mistake. The key is to correct it. You have to practice it." Saint Qianma looked deeply at Yan Beifei and said meaningfully. He was so frightened that he was drenched in sweat. His face was as pale as paper as he apologized profusely. "Old man, thank you, Saint Qianma, for saving me." Jiang Tian seemed to have just reacted. He hurriedly bowed to Saint Qianma, befitting the image of an old and frail mortal. "Sir, there's no need to be so polite." Saint Qianma returned the bow before turning around and sending the guests from the Eastern Empire away. "I will remember this kindness." Jiang Tian straightened his body and looked at Saint Qianma's back. He secretly made up his mind. In the next few days, the experts from the Ancient Medicine Hall, 9 Mysteries Sect, Thunder Yang Sect, and other sacred grounds arrived at the evil-infested ridge. Soon after, the leaders of the various sects and countries gathered together to discuss a plan of action. Your cultivation is not high. You might even have no cultivation. But no matter, we will do our best to ensure your safety. On this day, Saint Qianma gathered Jiang Tian and the other servants and said softly, Once you cooperate with us to complete the mission, you will directly become an elite disciple of my sect. The laws of the evil world would consume the laws of the cultivators and backfire on them. However, it did not have much effect on mortals. Sometimes, mortals would play a role that cultivators could not replace. This was also the reason why they brought a group of mortal servants. Chapter 2032. Fairy, I heard that the critical canyon leads to hell and is filled with demons and evil spirits. I'm afraid of death, so I don't want to go. Fairy, please forgive me for being useless. I really want to help, but I don't dare to. The servants were all afraid and wanted to leave. They tactfully but firmly refused. They knew the benefits of cultivation. Becoming an elite disciple of the Luoying sect was like a fish jumping through the dragon gate. But their lives were more important. Seeing this, Saint Chinma was disappointed, but she didn't want to force them. She forced a smile and said, "All right, then you can take the bounty and leave quickly. The critical canyon is about to open. This place will be even more dangerous." "Thank you, Fairy." Everyone left. Only Jiang Tian stepped forward and said, "Fairy, this old man is willing to go with you." Great. Saint Chinma was happy. At the very least, there was a mortal left behind. Rumble. At this moment, there was a sudden change. In the critical canyon, waves of demonic chi surged up into the sky like black ink. Countless demonic phantoms appeared and roared angrily as if they were going to rush out of the ground and devour the entire Saint Origin world. At this moment, whether it was cultivators or mortals, the entire Saint Origin world felt an evil, cruel, and depraved attraction. Whether it was the demon race or the human race, all kinds of evil and resentment were born in their hearts. They hated the heavens, hated the earth, hated the people, hated the karma, hated the cruel fate, and hated that they didn't kill enough. This was the power of the demonic chi's corruption and assimilation. Once assimilated, whether it was the demon race or the human race, they would all become demonic and become demonic. Of course, this was only the aftermath of the demonic chi. It wasn't the real corruption. The devilish hatred in the hearts of the common people of Saint Origin world only lasted for an instant. This is the demonic realm fragment nearing Saint Origin world. Jiang Tian's heart trembled as he stared at the abyss of the canyon. In essence, it was equivalent to two worlds that had merged through the demonic realm fragment. The treasures of the demonic realm and the resources of immortal ascension had all appeared. This demonic realm fragment used to be the ancient battlefield between humans and demons. Ja. At this moment, it was as if a great array had been activated. The components of the array began to rotate and mesh. Beams of light shot into the sky. Then, endless laws and fragments of the great Tao fell from the 9 heavens. They formed a rune array at the entrance of the canyon and suppressed the demonic chi. The two sides collided with each other and finally formed a relatively stable situation. The runes formed by the runes of the demonic realm and the laws of this world worked together to form a door, forming a passage to enter. It's open. The critical canyon is open. At that moment, someone shouted. Everyone regained their senses from the shock, and they all became restless. Even an expert like Saint Chinma could not remain calm. Even though the probability wasn't high, what if he encountered a Tao integration stage resource? Then she would be able to take another step forward. If even she was tempted, what more others? Everyone's emotions were very complicated. Nervousness, greed, fear, excitement, anticipation, more or less all of them. Let's go. An elder from the Hall of Ancient Medicine let out a loud roar as he led his disciples into the door and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Master, let's go as well. The Black Moon Empire's Yachang Emperor asked for permission from the Iron Hand Saint. After the latter slightly nodded, he waved his hand and thousands of armored horses broke through the sky and rushed into the door. Rumble. At this moment, the evil-infested ridge was very lively. Each sect and each country prepared their horses and armed themselves with weapons. They activated all kinds of magic treasures for concealment and defense and rushed towards the door in an orderly manner. Dao friend Huang Linger, once you enter the canyon and encounter danger, you can ask your brother for help. Rumble. At this moment, the Tian Luo sect also moved. When they passed by the Luo Ying sect, Yan Beifei looked at Huang Linger and openly teased her. This is the Huang Linger from the 10 Beauties painting that you were talking about? She's only Hisito. Her appearance is only good-looking. Beside her, Zhao Feifei also looked at Huang Linger with interest. She was not jealous, but rather looked down on her. After all, Yan Beifei married her and made her his servant. What was there to be jealous about? No need. Our Luo Ying sect's strength is not inferior to yours. Huang Linger's pretty face became cold and she frowned. She felt as if she had eaten a fly and was disgusted to the core. You don't need to be polite. Your brother is not a narrow-minded person. Even if we can't make a deal, I will still be benevolent. Yan Beifei didn't have any self-awareness. He was a self-proclaimed romantic. He thought about it. No matter cultivation or background, he was a good match. Huang Linger had no reason to reject him. She must be playing that game of loosening the reins only to grasp them better. Yes. With this thought, Yan Beifei felt that Huang Linger's rejection was even more interesting and aroused his desire to conquer. You're too ugly, Huang Linger straightforwardly said. This one sentence caused Yan Beifei's neck to turn red and he almost vomited blood. However, he couldn't continue to argue because they had reached the door and quickly entered the passage. Go. It's our turn. With Saint Qianma's order, everyone from the Luo Ying sect looked nervous and expectant. Next, the flying boat shone brightly and the propulsion furnace burned. The various runes carved on the boat also shone. It flew into the air and entered the passage through the door. Everyone's eyes widened. Through the protective barrier, they could see the scenery deep in the canyon. This was a completely different world. When they scanned with their divine sense, they didn't know how many millions of miles it was. It was much bigger than it looked. In essence, it belonged to the space fragment of the demonic world. It didn't belong to this world. In this world fragment, the mountains and rivers changed color. The plants and trees were demonized. It was filled with demonic qi. It was filled with violence, tragedy, destruction, killing, hatred, and other negative emotions. In front of them, the mountains were pitch black without any green. It was as if they were made of copper and iron. Even the dust was like iron shavings. As far as the eye could see, there was no life at all. In all directions, there were black mountains like iron dragon corpses. One by one, they intertwined on the ground. Demonized plants began to appear. Ancient vines were like strange snakes. Giant trees were like umbrellas. The branches and leaves were like demonic claws, blocking everyone's sight. As they went deeper, there were demonic roars and strange cries. Some were like poisonous snakes spitting out their tongues. Some were like rattlesnakes crawling past. Some were like thunder, shaking the earth and mountains, making people's scalps go numb. In addition, there were demonic mists that pervaded the air. Multicolored specks of light flickered about, extremely beautiful, but also full of danger. Some of the lights were even the size of a lamp. It was as if demonic beasts were watching coldly. It made people's hair stand on end. Stepping into this world, everyone tried their best to restrain their spiritual power. They tried their best to become mortals. This was because the laws of the demonic world seemed to have spirituality. They took the initiative to invade the laws of the human world. The stronger your spiritual power, the stronger the pressure from the laws of the demonic world. Stepping into this world, everyone felt that the demonic qi was dense and heavy. It was 10 times or 100 times denser than the outside world. However, at the same time, the laws of the continent were also 10 times or 100 times stricter here. They were used to resist the former. Therefore, this also reflected the characteristics of exploring this place. Risk and opportunity coexisted. Many cultivators who stepped into this place for the first time were moved by it. Its dangers, strangeness, and the opportunities it contained were all shocking. Critical Grand Canyon. Stepping into this world, even Jiang Tian sighed softly in his heart. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.